This video will help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Now, subscribe to the channel, relax, and let's begin. I still can't explain what happened that night back in '99. I've been turning it over in my head for years, and I still get goosebumps thinking about it. I was 20 then, living in Puerto Rico, into the punk scene and all that. It was a Friday night in August, hot as hell even at 3 in the morning when this shit went down. My buddy Carlos and I had just left this killer show at an underground venue in San Juan. Some local bands and one group from the States that was touring. I don't even remember their name now. That's how much what happened later overshadowed everything else. We were hyped up, ears still ringing, laughing about some dude who'd face planted trying to crowd surf. The venue was in this industrial area, and we had to take these back mountain roads to get home to Caguas. Anyone who knows Puerto Rico knows these roads. They wind through the mountains, no streetlights, fog rolling in from nowhere, and dense vegetation pressing in from both sides, sometimes swampy areas, other times just thick jungle. During the day, they're beautiful. At night, spooky as hell. I was driving my old Honda Civic, nothing special, but it was reliable. Carlos was in the passenger seat, still buzzed from the cheap beers we'd had. I was dead sober though, always was when driving, especially on those roads. One wrong turn and you're over the edge of a cliff. We'd been driving maybe 20 minutes, music playing low, when I noticed headlights in my rear view. Nothing weird about that at first, except they seemed to appear out of nowhere. The road behind us had been empty for miles. I remember thinking it was strange how quickly they were approaching, like unnaturally fast. "Someone's in a hurry," I said to Carlos, who was half asleep against the window. I did what any normal driver would do, moved a bit to the right and slowed down to let them pass. There was plenty of room, even on that narrow road, but instead of passing, the car came right up on my bumper, like dangerously close. I could see nothing but headlights filling my mirror. "What the fuck?" I remember saying, knuckles going white on the steering wheel. "This asshole's gonna rear-end us." Carlos sat up straight, looking back. "Maybe they're drunk? It's 3 in the morning." I sped up a little, thinking they'd back off. They didn't. They matched my speed exactly, staying right on my ass. Close enough that I couldn't even see their license plate under the glare of their headlights. Then the high beams started flashing. On, off, rhythmic, deliberate. Not like someone trying to signal something. More like they were trying to disorient us. "Is this some kind of road rage thing?" Carlos asked, voice tight with anxiety. I was working security at this mall parking lot back then, so I'd seen all kinds of weird behavior from drivers, but this felt different. It felt targeted. I pressed the gas harder, pushing my little Civic up to 70 miles per hour on a road that should be taken at 40 max. The curves were coming fast, my headlights barely cutting through the fog and darkness in time for me to react. The whole time, this car stayed glued to my bumper, matching every acceleration, taking every curve like it was nothing. "Try to see who it is," I told Carlos, trying to keep my voice steady. He twisted around in his seat. "Can't see shit with those high beams. Looks like a white car, that's all I can tell." My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. We were in the middle of nowhere. No houses, no other cars, no place to pull over safely. Just mountain on one side, steep drop on the other, and this aggressive driver behind us. I made a split-second decision and hit the brakes. Not hard enough to cause an accident, but enough to create some space between us. For a second, it worked. The car dropped back maybe 20 feet. Then something happened that still gives me nightmares. The car accelerated again, but this time it swerved into the oncoming lane and pulled up alongside us. That's when I got my first good look at it. It was a white sedan, not a Toyota or a Honda or any brand I recognized from working at the parking lot. It looked generic. Like if someone asked a kid to draw a car, that's what you'd get. No emblems, no distinctive grille, nothing, and no license plate. I'm 100% certain of that, but what really made my blood run cold was when I glanced at the driver. I expected to see some angry face, maybe someone drunk or high. Instead, there was just a figure, dark inside the car, but even with the interior light from my car spilling over, I couldn't make out a face. It was like looking at a mannequin or a person wearing a featureless mask, just a human-shaped silhouette with no real face. "Do you see that?" I whispered to Carlos. He didn't answer. When I glanced over, he was pressed against his door, as far from the other car as possible, eyes wide with terror. We were coming up on a curve, and I had to focus on the road. When I looked back, the car had dropped behind us again. Then suddenly, it shot forward, cut in front of us, and slammed on its brakes. I nearly pissed myself trying to stop in time. My tires screeched, and we fishtailed slightly before coming to a stop maybe 6 feet from their bumper. They had us blocked completely. Cliff on one side, mountain on the other, them in front. "We need to back up," Carlos said, voice shaking. "They'll just follow us," I replied. My mind was racing through possibilities. Carjacking, some kind of gang initiation, but why here, on this empty road? The white car just sat there, engine running, headlights illuminating the fog in front of it, not moving, like it was waiting for us to do something. I reached under my seat where I kept a tire iron. "If they get out, we run into the trees," I told Carlos, nodding toward the dense vegetation on the mountainside. Better to lose the car than our lives. We sat there for what felt like forever, but was probably only 30 seconds. My shirt was soaked with sweat despite the AC running full blast. Carlos was breathing so hard I could hear it over the engine. Then the white car did something impossible. It straightened itself on the road, perpendicular to us, like it was positioning itself to drive away. It sat motionless for maybe 3 seconds. No brake lights, nothing. Just a white shape in the darkness. And then it drove forward and... I don't know how else to describe this. It faded away, not like it drove into the fog and disappeared from view. It literally faded, becoming transparent and then gone, like someone was turning down the opacity in Photoshop. 1 second it was there, solid and real, and the next it was just gone. Neither of us spoke. I couldn't even move. My hands were frozen to the steering wheel. "Did you?" Carlos finally whispered. "Yeah," I said. "I saw it." We sat there for at least 15 minutes, afraid to move forward, afraid to back up. Eventually, another car came from behind us, a normal car with a normal driver who honked impatiently until I finally managed to get my Honda moving again. The rest of the drive home was silent except for the radio, which we turned up loud to fill the terrifying quiet. We kept expecting the white car to reappear, but it never did. When we finally got back to my place, it was almost 4:30 in the morning. We sat in my driveway for a long time before either of us had the courage to get out of the car. It sounds stupid, but I reached out and patted my car's dashboard before I left it, like I was thanking it for keeping us safe. "We don't tell anyone about this," Carlos said as we walked to my front door on shaky legs. "They'll think we were high or something." I agreed, but here I am, 20-some years later, finally talking about it. Carlos and I never mentioned it again, not even to each other. We drifted apart after a few years. He moved to the mainland. I stayed in Puerto Rico until 2004, but I sometimes wonder if he still thinks about it too. I've driven those mountain roads hundreds of times since then, in daylight and darkness. I've never seen anything like that car again. I've researched local legends, ghost stories, everything I could find about the area. Nothing matches what we experienced. The rational part of my brain wants to say it was just some asshole messing with us, and the vanishing was a trick of the fog and my terrified mind. But I know what I saw. That car wasn't normal. The driver wasn't normal. Sometimes when I'm driving at night and see headlights behind me, my heart rate still spikes. I still check my rear view obsessively, looking for a featureless white sedan. I still avoid those mountain roads after dark when I visit family back home. I don't know what we encountered that night. A ghost car? Some kind of supernatural predator? A glitch in reality? All I know is that it was real, it happened, and it changed something in me. There are things out there on lonely roads at night that don't follow the rules of our world, and sometimes they decide to follow you instead. Story 2. I've never really told this story properly before. I've mentioned bits and pieces to friends after a few beers, but I've always held back the full extent of what happened. Honestly, I was afraid people would think I was making it up or that I was crazy. But I need to get this off my chest now. I grew up in northern England, in this tiny hamlet nestled in the moors. It was the kind of place tourists drive through and think is charming, but living there was different. Everyone knew everyone's business, and there was this underlying heaviness to the place, but nothing compared to our house. We moved there when I was 8. My parents were excited about the price. It was way below market value for the size and location. Now I understand why. The previous owners had gone through a nasty divorce. The husband left, and the wife apparently spiraled into drug addiction. The locals had plenty to say about it once we moved in. According to them, the house had a pattern. Families would move in happy, then leave broken within a year or two. Always messy divorces, sometimes violent ones. My mum laughed it off as village gossip. From the first day, something felt off about the place. Despite having these massive windows and my parents painting everything in bright colors, the house felt dark. Not just dim, but like it absorbed light. My bedroom was the worst. There was this corner, just a normal corner where two walls met. But I swear to God, something was always watching me from there. I'd wake up at night feeling eyes on me, and my gaze would always be drawn to that spot. Our neighbor's kid, John, became my friend pretty quickly. About a month after we moved in, he told me something that made my blood run cold. His sister and her friends had used a Ouija board in their house, which shared a wall with ours, a few years back. During their session, her bed supposedly lifted off the ground, slammed against the wall, and dropped back down. The girls freaked out, threw the board away, and never touched it again. The problem? They didn't properly close the session. Anyone who knows anything about that stuff knows that's a massive no-no. I tried to forget about it, but weird things started happening almost immediately. One night, maybe 3 months after moving in, I was in my raised bed watching TV. It was around 2 or 3 in the morning. I was a bit of an insomniac even as a kid. A cleaning product commercial came on, and clear as day, I heard an elderly woman's voice right next to my ear say, "What a load of old shite." I nearly pissed myself. It wasn't muffled or distant. It was like someone was lying right next to me. I switched the TV off and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Then there was the action figure incident. I was into making these stop-motion videos with my toys. I had the camera set up, was moving the figures bit by bit, when this Batman figure, just a normal plastic toy with no moving head, turned and looked directly at the camera. Then it turned back with this audible click. I dropped the camera and ran downstairs. When I eventually got the courage to watch the footage back, there was nothing there, just a jump cut where the battery had apparently died. My digital camera started doing weird shit too. One night it switched itself on while sitting on my desk. It began cycling through the photos stored on it, but not at a regular pace. It would linger on pictures of me and my sister, sometimes for 30 seconds or more, then rapidly flick through photos of animals or toys. I just sat there watching, too scared to touch it. Eventually, I yanked the batteries out. During lightning storms, which were common out on the moors, I'd see faces in my wallpaper, and not in that way where your brain makes patterns out of random shapes. These were distinct, detailed faces that would appear and disappear with each flash. Sometimes it was a woman with a veil, hands clasped like she was praying. Other times it was this weathered, screaming face with these weird, swept-back horns. I'd hide under my blanket until the storm passed. The worst incident happened when my dad and I were watching a DVD. He paused it to go get a drink from the kitchen, and while he was gone, the screen changed. Instead of the paused movie, it showed writhing maggots with text that read, "1 in 5 members of your family will drop dead of heart disease." There was this horrible scraping metal sound coming from the speakers. I tried to call out to my dad, but my voice wouldn't work. When he came back in, The screen was normal again. I tried to tell him what happened, but he just thought I was making up stories. It wasn't just me experiencing things either. John from next door came over one afternoon, and we were playing video games in the living room when he suddenly went pale. He pointed to the ceiling and asked if I could see them. When I asked what he meant, he said there were these orbs circling the room. I couldn't see anything, but he was genuinely terrified. He ran out of the house and refused to come back for weeks. My grandmother stayed with us for a week during school holidays. On her second night, I found her sitting in the dark living room at about midnight, just staring into space. When I asked if she was okay, she calmly told me she was watching the pretty lights. According to her, there were golden orbs floating gently around the room. The weirdest part, she wasn't scared at all. She said they felt peaceful. That same visit, my sister's Halloween dollhouse, this tacky plastic thing with a button that made the lights flash and played a witch's cackle, went off by itself at 3 in the morning, scared the shit out of my gran that time. The house didn't just affect objects, it affected people too. My parents changed after we moved in. My mum, who'd always been outgoing and confident, became withdrawn and jumpy. She'd stare out windows for hours or check locks repeatedly. My dad, who'd never been aggressive before, started having these explosive temper tantrums over nothing. He'd punch walls and scream about insignificant things, like a misplaced remote control. About a year after we moved in, my dad had an affair with a woman from his work. My parents separated, and my mum turned to alcohol. She'd been a social drinker before, but now she was going through bottles of wine every night. The family that moved in happy was breaking apart exactly like the local gossip had predicted. During this period, I started having these dreams that would come true. Not in any useful way like lottery numbers, but in small, specific details. I dreamed that John's dog would attack my friend's pet rabbit, and 3 days later, it nearly happened. I was able to stop it only because I recognized the situation unfolding exactly as I dreamed it. I dreamed about a teacher having a car accident, and the next week she came in with a neck brace from a fender bender. Then there were the mirror incidents. I'd sometimes wake up in the middle of the night to find myself standing in the bathroom, staring into the mirror. I have no history of sleepwalking before or since living in that house. A couple of times, and I know how this sounds, it wasn't my reflection looking back. It was a young woman with dark circles under her eyes. The image would only last a split second before returning to my reflection, but it happened enough times that I started avoiding mirrors altogether. The smoke alarms would go off randomly, always at night, always when there was nothing triggering them. The computer in the living room would suddenly play videos, not exactly pornography, but uncomfortable adult content, when my sister and I were alone in the house. Once, all the family photos on the wall rotated 45 degrees in the same direction overnight. My parents officially divorced after 2 years in that house. My mum kept it in the settlement, probably the worst victory she could have claimed. Her drinking got worse. I started staying at friends' houses as much as possible. My sister retreated into herself, barely speaking for months at a time. We finally moved out when I was 12. After my mum met a new partner who convinced her to sell the place. I remember the day we left. I felt this weight lift off me as soon as we crossed the threshold. It was like I could suddenly breathe properly again after years of only getting shallow breaths. The house sold quickly despite its reputation. The new family seemed nice, a couple with twin boys about 6 years old. I sometimes wonder if they experienced what we did. I sometimes wonder if they're still together. My parents never reconciled. My dad remarried and moved to Scotland. My mum eventually got sober, but she's never been the same person she was before that house. My sister and I don't talk about what happened there. I think we're both afraid that acknowledging it would somehow invite it back into our lives. I'm 32 now, and I still have nightmares about that corner in my bedroom. Still wake up sometimes feeling watched. Still can't stand the sound of static on a TV. I don't believe in ghosts or demons, at least not in the traditional sense. But I believe that house had something in it, something that fed on our fear and unhappiness, something that worked to create more of both. Sometimes I think about going back just to see if I'd still feel it, but even the thought makes my chest tight. Whatever was in that house, poltergeist, negative energy, or something else entirely, it changed the course of my family's life. And the most terrifying part is that I'll never know exactly what it was or why it chose us. Story 3: I've been meaning to share this for a while now, but I'm still trying to make sense of it myself. I'm not asking anyone to believe me. I just need to get this off my chest because it's been driving me crazy for months. Maybe someone here has experienced something similar. I moved to Boston about 2 years ago for a job in marketing. Found a decent 2-bedroom apartment that I share with my roommate, Kira. The rent's steep, but that's Boston for you. Everything was completely normal at first. I decorated my room, settled into a routine, started dating my boyfriend Mark, nothing out of the ordinary. Then about 8 months ago, I saw her for the first time. I was making dinner in the kitchen, just chopping vegetables, when I got this weird feeling like someone was watching me. You know that sensation when the hairs on your neck stand up? I turned around, and there she was. A woman standing in the doorway between the kitchen and living room. She was maybe 5'8", wearing blue jeans and this bright orange long-sleeved shirt, dark shoulder-length hair, longer nose. The detail that freaks me out the most is that I could see her so clearly. This wasn't some blurry shadow or something I glimpsed from the corner of my eye. She was just there, looking at me with this expression I still can't quite describe. Sad, lost, confused, all of the above, I guess. I dropped the knife I was holding and screamed. She vanished instantly. My roommate wasn't home, so I called Mark in a panic. He came over right away, but of course there was nothing to find. I felt stupid, and he probably thought I was just stressed from work or something. I tried to convince myself it was a weird hallucination from being tired. But then she showed up again a week later. This time I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth before bed. I looked up into the mirror, and there she was standing behind me. I spun around so fast I nearly fell over. But again, she disappeared the instant I tried to face her directly. After the third time, she was standing behind Kira while we were watching a movie. I realized this wasn't going away. What was most disturbing was how she kept appearing behind people. Behind Mark, behind Kira, behind friends who came over, never threatening, never doing anything scary, just standing there. Sometimes she would open her mouth like she was trying to speak or point at something I couldn't see. I didn't tell anyone except Mark because I was afraid they'd think I was losing it. Even Mark seemed skeptical, but he was supportive. Maybe the place has some history, he suggested. I looked into it. But our building was only built in the 90s. Nothing tragic had happened here as far as I could find. Then the second presence started making itself known about 3 months in. It began with the TV turning on by itself in the middle of the night. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning to the sound of music coming from the living room. Not just any music, country and bluegrass, which is weird because I hate country music. I've never listened to it, don't have any playlists with it, nothing. The first few times, I thought maybe Kira was up late, but she swore it wasn't her, and I believed her because she's more into indie rock. Plus, it happened once when she was out of town visiting her parents. Then, things escalated. One night, Mark and I were in my bedroom watching Netflix when suddenly we heard music blasting from the living room, like ear-splittingly loud. I remember freezing because Kira was away for the weekend. We were supposed to be alone in the apartment. Mark grabbed a knife from my bedside drawer. I keep one there since living alone in the city. We crept down the hallway, hearts pounding. The sound was deafening, some twangy country song I'd never heard before. When we reached the living room, there was nobody there, just the TV on. Volume cranked all the way up to 96, the maximum. It was playing some random YouTube country music video. I hadn't even been using YouTube that day. Mark checked the whole apartment while I tried to figure out how the TV had turned on. Nothing was out of place, no signs of a break-in. When I picked up the remote to turn it off, the music stopped instantly. Not like when you press the button and it takes a second. It stopped the exact moment my fingers touched the plastic. We went back to my room, pretty freaked out but trying to rationalize it. Maybe the remote had malfunctioned? Maybe someone was hacking my smart TV? Then, as we were sitting on my bed discussing it, the same damn song started playing again, but this time from my bedroom TV, which had been off. I tried to record it on my phone as proof, but the second I hit record, the music stopped. When I put my phone down, it started again. I checked the YouTube history afterward. Nothing. No country music videos in my watch history at all. That's when I started to feel like whatever this was, it wasn't just some random ghost. It felt targeted, personal. And unlike the woman who just seemed sad and lost, this presence felt angry, hostile even. Things kept happening over the next few months. Items would disappear and reappear in different places. The temperature in certain rooms would drop suddenly. But the music thing was consistent, always country or bluegrass, always when I least expected it. About 2 months after the TV incident, I was home alone studying for a work certification. I had unplugged my Alexa because it kept activating randomly, another thing I blamed on this presence. I was deep into my notes when suddenly music started blasting from the kitchen. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I ran to the kitchen and found my Alexa, which I swear I had unplugged, playing some old Johnny Cash song at full volume. I yanked the plug out of the wall, but the music continued for another 30 seconds before abruptly cutting off. At this point, I was getting desperate for answers. I hadn't told anyone except Mark about what was happening because it sounds completely insane. But for his birthday, his sister got him this fun gift, a session with a medium who supposedly specializes in connecting with spirits. Mark thought it would be entertaining. I went along with it, not expecting anything, but also secretly hoping that maybe, just maybe, this person could tell me something useful. The medium, a woman named Sandra, came to our apartment. I hadn't told her anything about my experiences, hadn't mentioned a single word about seeing a woman or the music or anything. I wanted to test if she was legitimate. We were barely 15 minutes into the session when she suddenly stopped mid-sentence and looked at me with this intense expression. "The woman," she said. "You've been seeing her, haven't you?" My blood ran cold. Mark looked at me, shocked. He knew I hadn't said anything to Sandra beforehand. "She's lost," Sandra continued. "She doesn't know why she's here or if she has any connection to you, but she's been trying to communicate something important." Sandra described the woman exactly as I'd been seeing her. The jeans, the bright shirt, the shoulder-length dark hair. She said the woman had been trying to reach me through dreams but wasn't strong enough to break through. Then, without prompting, Sandra said, "There's someone else here too, a man. He's angrier, more volatile." She explained that this male presence was manifesting through music because it was significant to him in life, country and bluegrass specifically. She said he seemed possessive of the space and didn't like sharing it. When I asked if these spirits were attached to the apartment, Sandra shook her head. "They're attached to you," she said. "They'd follow you if you moved." That was the most terrifying part. These weren't just random ghosts haunting my apartment. They were somehow connected to me specifically. But I have no idea why. I've never had paranormal experiences before moving here. I don't know anyone who died who matches their descriptions. The woman still appears occasionally, always standing behind someone, always with that same sad expression. Sometimes she'll open her mouth wide like she's screaming, but no sound comes out. Other times she'll point urgently at something I can't identify. The male presence is less visual but more disruptive. The music still happens, TVs turn on, Alexa activates. Even my phone will sometimes start playing country songs from apps I don't even have installed. The apartment will get cold suddenly, or things will move when I'm not looking. I've tried sage, salt, prayers, everything I could find online. Nothing works. Sandra suggested I try to communicate with them directly, but honestly, I'm terrified to open that door any further. Last week, Mark stayed over and woke me up around 2 in the morning. He was white as a sheet, staring at the foot of the bed. When I asked what was wrong, he just pointed. I couldn't see anything, but he insisted the woman was standing there, opening and closing her mouth like she was trying to speak. That same night, after Mark finally fell back asleep, I got up to use the bathroom. As I was washing my hands, I heard what sounded like a whisper right in my ear. "Listen." The voice was rough, male. When I turned around, no one was there, but my shower curtain was swaying slightly, as if someone had just brushed past it. I'm at my wit's end. I can't move because of my lease, and apparently it wouldn't help anyway if what Sandra said is true. Kira thinks I'm just stressed and imagining things. Mark believes me but doesn't know how to help. I've learned to live with the woman. She seems harmless, just lost and confused, but the male presence scares me. There's an anger there that I don't understand, and it seems to be getting stronger. Last night, I was alone in the apartment. I'd fallen asleep on the couch watching TV when I was jolted awake by the sound of heavy footsteps crossing my living room floor. I opened my eyes but couldn't move. It was like something was holding me down. The footsteps stopped right in front of me, and I felt the couch cushions sink down as if someone had sat beside me. The room got so cold I could see my breath. Then my phone, which was on the coffee table, lit up and started playing a bluegrass song I'd never heard before. As the music played, I felt something brush against my hair, like fingers running through it. I still couldn't move, couldn't scream. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the weight lifted from the couch, the music stopped, and I could move again. I ran to my bedroom and locked the door, where I stayed until morning. I don't know what these spirits want from me. I don't know why they're here or what connection they have to my life. All I know is that they're real, they're with me, and they're not going away. If anyone has experienced anything like this or has any advice beyond the usual sage and salt circles, I'm desperate for help. I'm afraid of what might happen if the male entity gets stronger or if I finally hear what the woman is trying to tell me. Story 4. I still get goosebumps when I think about that morning at my grandmother's house in Mapleton. It's been 3 months, and I've replayed it in my head countless times, trying to make sense of what happened. I've never been particularly superstitious or believed in ghosts, but after that day, I don't know what to believe anymore. My boyfriend Mark and I had been staying in my grandmother's basement for the weekend. It was a nice little setup down there, a pull-out couch, small TV, and this old wooden coffee table that's probably been there since the 70s. The basement always had this distinct smell, kind of musty but with traces of my grandma's lavender air freshener trying to mask it. That morning, it was a Saturday in early May, I was half asleep. You know that state where you're aware of your surroundings but can't quite pull yourself into full consciousness? That's where I was. Mark was still completely out beside me, snoring softly. He could sleep through a tornado, I swear. It must have been around 8 or 9 in the morning. I could hear my in-laws upstairs, my grandmother and grandfather moving around in the kitchen. Their voices drifted down through the old heating vents. They were discussing plans for the day. Something about going to the farmer's market and then visiting my grandfather's brother in the afternoon. Nothing unusual. I was drifting in and out, thinking about whether I should get up or try to fall back asleep, when I felt it. The air in the basement seemed to change. It's hard to describe, like when you can feel someone watching you. The temperature didn't drop dramatically or anything Hollywood-esque like that. It was subtle, just different. Then I sensed someone enter the room. I didn't hear footsteps exactly, but I had that awareness that I wasn't alone anymore. Well, besides Mark, who was still dead to the world beside me. I figured it was my grandmother coming to check if we were awake yet, or to grab something from the storage area. I was still in that foggy, half-asleep state, my eyes heavy and unwilling to open fully. Through my barely open eyelids, I could make out a figure standing at the foot of the pull-out couch. It looked like a woman, but everything was blurry. I assumed it was my grandmother, though something felt off. The shape seemed less solid than it should have been. I felt a gentle pressure on the side of the bed as if someone had sat down near my feet. Then, and this is the part that still makes my skin crawl, I felt a hand on my ankle, not threatening or aggressive, but gentle, caring even. The hand started to massage my foot tenderly, like someone trying to wake me up in the nicest way possible. In my drowsy state, I chuckled softly and twitched my foot away a bit. I remember thinking it was weird that my grandmother would do that. She's never been the type to wake me up with a foot massage. It was such an intimate gesture, almost maternal, but not something she'd ever done before. I'm up, I mumbled, still not opening my eyes fully. The gentle massage continued for another few seconds and then stopped. When I finally forced my eyes open, expecting to see my grandmother sitting there, the foot of the bed was empty. I looked around the basement. No one was there except Mark, still asleep and completely oblivious. I sat up, confused. Had I dreamed it? But it felt so real. I could still feel the sensation of those fingers on my foot. I shook Mark awake. "Did you see my grandma come down here?" I asked him. He grumbled something incoherent and rolled over. Typical. I decided to head upstairs for coffee and to see if my grandmother was there. When I got to the kitchen, my grandmother was at the stove making breakfast, and my grandfather was sitting at the table reading the newspaper. They both looked up when I entered. "Morning, sleepyhead," my grandmother said with a smile. "Coffee's fresh." "Were you just downstairs?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual, even though my heart was racing a bit. She shook her head. "Not since I put a load of laundry in about an hour ago." "Why?" "I thought someone came down and—" "Never mind," I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee. I didn't want to sound crazy. Maybe I had dreamed it after all. We had breakfast, and then my grandparents left for the farmer's market as planned. Mark finally dragged himself upstairs around 11, and we spent the day watching TV and helping clean up the yard. I tried to dismiss the morning incident, but it kept nagging at me. That evening, after dinner, my grandmother and I were washing dishes while the men watched some game on TV. I decided to bring it up. "Grandma, are you sure you didn't come downstairs this morning and try to wake me up?" She turned to me, soapy plate in hand. "No, honey. Like I said, I only went down for the laundry early on. Why do you keep asking?" I took a deep breath and told her what happened, about feeling someone sit on the bed and massage my foot. As I spoke, I noticed her face getting paler. "What?" I asked, alarmed by her expression. She put the plate down and dried her hands slowly on a dish towel. "Julia, I need to tell you something." We sat at the kitchen table, and she lowered her voice so the men wouldn't hear. "This house, sometimes strange things happen here," she began. "I've never told many people because I didn't want to seem crazy or scare anyone." My grandmother explained that over the 35 years they'd lived in the house, she'd experienced multiple unexplainable things. The most common was hearing her name called when she was alone in the house. She'd hear "Margaret" clear as day in a woman's voice, but there would never be anyone there. "One time," she continued, "I was taking a nap on the couch and I felt someone stroking my hair. I thought it was your grandfather, but when I opened my eyes, no one was there. He was out in the garage the whole time." My hands were shaking as I held my coffee mug. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" What was I supposed to say? That our house might have a ghost? She sighed. "Besides, whatever it is has never felt threatening, just present." That night, I couldn't sleep. Mark was out cold beside me, but I kept staring into the dark corners of the basement, straining to see any movement, any sign of the presence I'd felt that morning. The basement suddenly seemed so much older, so much more filled with history than I'd ever noticed before. I started thinking about who might have lived in this house before my grandparents bought it in the 80s. Had someone died here? Was it a woman? And why would she touch my foot of all things? The next morning, I called my mom in a panic. "Do you know if anyone died in Grandma and Grandpa's house before they moved in?" My mom was confused by my sudden interest, but told me that she believed the previous owners had all moved out alive. The house was built in the 1950s, and as far as she knew, there hadn't been any tragic events there. This somehow made it worse. If no one had died there, then what was I experiencing? Had something followed my grandparents there? or me. I spent the next few days researching the history of Mapleton, looking for any clues. The town had its share of old stories and legends, but nothing specific to my grandparents' street or house. I even found myself reading about different types of hauntings and paranormal phenomena, something I would have laughed at just a week earlier. What stuck with me most was the gentleness of the touch. This wasn't some malevolent spirit trying to scare me. The foot massage felt caring, almost like a mother checking on a child. It was intimate in a way that felt personal, like whoever or whatever it was knew me. I've been back to my grandparents' house twice since then. Each time, I find myself both dreading and hoping for another encounter. I've slept in the same basement, in the same pull-out couch, but nothing has happened. It's like whatever was there that morning has gone quiet. Or maybe it said what it needed to say with that one gentle touch. My grandmother and I have had several more conversations about the house and its unexplainable events. She told me about lights turning on and off, objects being moved to different places, and the persistent feeling of being watched, but never in a threatening way. It's like having a roommate you never see, she said once. Someone who's just there. I still don't know what to make of it all. Was it a ghost, some kind of energy imprint, or just a very vivid dream that happened to coincide with my grandmother's own experiences? Whatever it was, that gentle touch on my foot has changed how I view the world. There are things we can't explain, presences we can't see but can somehow feel, and sometimes they reach out to us in the most unexpected ways. I haven't told many people about this. Who would believe me? A ghost that gives foot massages. It sounds ridiculous, but I know what I felt that morning. I know it was real. And sometimes, late at night when I'm alone, I find myself wondering if she's there, watching over me, waiting for another moment to reach out and let me know she's still around. The most unsettling part isn't the experience itself anymore. It's not knowing who she was or why she chose me. Was she a relative I never knew, a previous resident attached to the house, or something else entirely? I may never know. But whatever, whoever she is, she doesn't seem to wish me harm. And in the world of ghost stories, I suppose that's something to be grateful for. Story: I've been living in this apartment in Portland for about 2 years now, and I've always felt like I wasn't alone here. Not in a terrifying something is watching me sleep kind of way, more like how you know when your cat is in the room, even if you can't see it. It's just a feeling you get. This morning though, things went from, that's weird, to, holy shit, I'm not making this up. So I woke up about an hour before my alarm was supposed to go off. It was still dark out, that weird pre-dawn darkness where everything looks slightly blue. I wasn't startled awake or anything, just suddenly awake, like my body decided sleep time was over. I hate when that happens because I know I'll be exhausted later, but whatever. I got up to pee, the real reason I probably woke up, and when I flipped on the bathroom light, I noticed something hanging from my shower curtain rod that definitely wasn't there when I went to bed. It was this cheap scarf with these little coin-like metal beads dangling from it. My partner picked it up at some estate sale a few weeks ago, and I'd stuffed it in a drawer because it wasn't really my style. But there it was, hanging perfectly centered on the rod, like someone had deliberately placed it there. Now, I've had weird stuff happen in this apartment before. Keys moving to different spots, things falling when nobody's near them. Sometimes hearing what sounds like someone shuffling around in another room when I'm home alone. I'd started half-jokingly referring to whatever it was as my little invisible pest, but I'd never felt threatened by it. I stood there for a minute staring at this scarf, trying to figure out how it could have gotten there. My partner was out of town visiting family, so it wasn't him playing a prank. The drawer where I'd put the scarf was closed when I woke up. I'm a pretty light sleeper, so I don't think I would have hung it up in my sleep without waking myself up. Something about the scarf had always given me a weird vibe, to be honest. Not necessarily bad, just something. The little metal coins had these symbols on them that looked like they were supposed to mean something, but I was pretty sure they were just decorative. You know, the kind of fake meaningful symbols you see on cheap imported stuff. Probably some Oriental trading post-cultural appropriation type thing. I reached up and took the scarf down to look at it closer. The little coins clinked together softly as I held it under the bathroom light. I couldn't quite make out the patterns stamped into them. I should do a rubbing of these to see what they actually look like, I whispered to myself, turning one of the coins between my fingers. And that's when it happened. I was standing there holding the scarf when one of the coins, the one I hadn't been touching, just detached itself from the fabric. It didn't fall straight down. It moved sideways, like something invisible pinched it off and carried it about 2 feet away from where I was standing before dropping it directly at my feet. It landed with a tiny clink on the tile, perfectly flat, heavy side down. I'm not exaggerating when I say I stopped breathing for a second. I've seen weird shit before, but this was so deliberate, so fucking obvious. I couldn't explain it away as maybe it was the wind, or must have been balanced weirdly and fell. This was intentional. Something took that coin off the scarf and dropped it at my feet. My first instinct was to run out of the bathroom, but curiosity got the better of me. I slowly bent down and picked up the coin. It wasn't warm or cold or anything unusual, just a small metal disc with some pattern stamped into it. I looked back at the scarf in my hand. The thread where this coin had been attached was clearly broken, with a little tuft of thread still hanging there. "Okay," I said out loud, my voice sounding weird in the quiet bathroom. "I see you now." Nothing dramatic happened after that. No doors slamming or lights flickering or anything. Just silence. But I swear the air felt different, like when someone's trying not to laugh. I took the coin and the scarf back to my bedroom and turned on all the lights. My heart was racing, but not exactly from fear, more from the adrenaline of finally having confirmation that I wasn't imagining things all this time. For the next hour, instead of going back to sleep, I sat on my bed with my laptop, researching the symbols on the coins. I took photos of them and ran reverse image searches, checked sites about ancient symbols and languages, even some occult forums. Nothing matched exactly. The more I looked, the more I realized they probably were just random decorative patterns made to look vaguely mystical, with no actual meaning or language behind them. And that's when I had a weird thought. What if that was the point? I've dealt with actual malicious entities before in my life. When I was a teenager, something used to bang on my bedroom windows at night. I once lived in an apartment where small fires would start randomly, pyromancy, I later learned it's called. I've experienced the dark spots that seem to absorb light, the painful night terrors that leave you gasping, things breaking with no explanation. This felt different, almost playful. I started thinking about other weird occurrences in my apartment, like how my keys always seem to disappear when I'm running late for something I don't actually want to go to, but are right where they should be when I'm excited about my plans. Or how my laptop charger will vanish when I'm procrastinating on work, only to reappear when I've actually gotten started with pen and paper. Was this little invisible pest actually trying to help me in its own weird way? The more I thought about it, the more I wondered if what happened with the coin was deliberate in a different way than I first assumed. Maybe it knew I'd get fixated on trying to translate symbols that weren't actually translatable. Maybe it was trying to distract me from doing something that wasn't actually beneficial. Or maybe that's just my ADHD brain trying to create a narrative that justifies my endless distractions. Who knows? But I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever shared my space was becoming more bold, more willing to show itself directly, like it was tired of the subtle hints and wanted to make sure I knew it was there. I put the scarf and the detached coin on my nightstand and tried to go back to sleep, but I was way too wired. I kept looking at the space above the scarf, half expecting to see a hand or a face or something materialize. Nothing did, but around 5:30 in the morning, just as dawn was starting to break, the scarf shifted slightly on my nightstand, not like it was blown by a breeze, more like someone had pinched one corner and tugged it about an inch to the left. "I see you," I said again, staring at the spot above the scarf. "What do you want?" No response, of course. but I swear the air in that corner of the room seemed to shimmer slightly, like heat rising from asphalt in summer. I've had paranormal experiences before that left me terrified, questioning my sanity, sleeping with the lights on for weeks. But this one just left me feeling curious, maybe even a little comforted in a weird way. When my alarm finally went off, I got up and went about my morning routine, hyper-aware of every little sound and movement in the apartment. Nothing else, obviously supernatural, happened, but I kept getting that feeling you get when someone's staring at you. I decided to do a little experiment. I took the scarf and hung it back up in the bathroom, leaving the detached coin on the edge of the sink. Then I went to the kitchen to make coffee. When I came back 10 minutes later, the coin was gone from the sink. I searched the floor, thinking maybe it had fallen, but it was nowhere to be found. Then I noticed the scarf. The missing coin had been reattached, not sewn back on, but somehow stuck back in place. I reached out and gently tugged on it. It came away in my hand immediately, not actually attached at all, just balanced perfectly in place to look like it had been reattached. That's when I started laughing, not out of fear, but because it felt like I was being pranked by something that had a genuine sense of humor. "Okay, you've got skills, I'll give you that," I said out loud, still chuckling. The shower curtain rippled slightly, though there wasn't any draft in the bathroom. I've spent the rest of the day wondering what to do with this new relationship, I guess. I'm not scared, which is weird considering I'm basically confirming that my apartment is haunted. But it doesn't feel threatening. It feels like I'm finally acknowledging a roommate who's been here all along. I'm not going to try any banishing rituals or call in paranormal investigators. I'm just going to see where this goes. Maybe leave out small offerings. See if communication becomes more direct. I've named it Charlie. Don't ask me why. The name just popped into my head while I was making dinner, and it felt right. Tonight, I'm going to leave the scarf out on my dresser with a note that says, "Can we be friends?" Let's see what happens. I never thought I'd be in a position where I'm willingly trying to interact with a spirit, but here we are. Life is weird sometimes. My apartment is weird all the time. If anything else happens, I'll update. For now, I'm just processing the fact that my little invisible pest decided to finally show itself today, and I'm strangely okay with it. Has anyone else experienced something like this? A presence that feels more mischievous than malevolent? I can't be the only one who's made friends with their house ghost, right? Story 6. I've been putting off writing about this for weeks now, but I need to get it off my chest. I've always been pretty level-headed about paranormal stuff. Ghost stories, haunted houses, that was all just entertainment to me, at least until 3 weeks ago. I work construction in Havenbrook. Yeah, that tiny dot on the map where everyone knows everyone. My mom runs a small construction company, mostly residential projects, and I've been working for her since I dropped out of community college 2 years ago. It's honest work, pays the bills, and I actually enjoy it most days. We were finishing up a duplex on Oakwood Lane, one of those modern-looking places with lots of exposed brick and those trendy open floor plans everyone wants now. The structure was mostly complete, but we still had a bunch of interior work to finish. Flooring, fixtures, final electrical, that kind of stuff. My buddy Marcus and I had been assigned to install the security systems that evening. The timing wasn't ideal. We got there around 6:30, just as the sun was setting. October evenings get dark fast here, and the temporary construction lights cast these weird, long shadows across the unfinished rooms. The place was just shells of rooms with exposed wiring and half-finished drywall. We had the whole place to ourselves since the rest of the crew had left around 4. Marcus and I have been friends since high school, and we always listen to music while we work. It keeps us from going crazy with boredom during repetitive tasks. I had brought my JBL speaker and laptop, and we set it up in what would eventually be the living room of the first unit. We had a pretty good system going. I was mounting the security panel near the front door, while Marcus was running cables through the walls to connect everything. "Dude, put on something good," Marcus called from across the room, where he was feeding wire through a hole in the drywall. I queued up some Clash songs from my Apple Music account. Old school rock always makes work go faster. Should I Stay or Should I Go started playing, and we got into a rhythm with our work. About 20 minutes in, I noticed something weird. The volume on the speaker kept adjusting itself, going up, then down, then up again. At first, I thought it was just the connection being spotty, but then I realized it was changing at specific moments in the song, almost like someone was playing with the controls. "Hey, are you messing with my speaker?" I called out to Marcus. He looked up from where he was kneeling by an outlet. "What? No, I'm all the way over here." I walked over to check the speaker. The volume was at max now, and I hadn't touched it. I turned it down, but as soon as I stepped away, it cranked itself back up again. My laptop was about 10 feet away on a stack of drywall sheets, and nobody was near it. "That's weird," I muttered, reducing the volume again. Marcus came over to look. "Maybe the speaker's glitching." "Maybe," I said, though I'd never had issues with it before. We tried to ignore it and get back to work, but then something even stranger happened. The music suddenly changed. Instead of continuing with The Clash, it switched to a recommended playlist, something I definitely didn't select. Apple Music was suggesting songs I'd never heard before, which wasn't unusual, but what was weird was that it was happening without either of us touching my laptop or phone. "Did you change the music?" Marcus asked, looking confused. "No, man, I'm nowhere near my computer." We both walked over to the laptop. The screen showed Apple Music was indeed playing songs from a recommended playlist, but neither of us had selected it. I closed the app and reopened it, thinking maybe it was just a glitch. That's when things got really messed up. As soon as I reopened Apple Music, it started playing a song called Memoir Number 2, this really sad, slow piano piece that sounded like something you'd hear at a funeral. I'd never heard it before, never searched for anything like it. The volume immediately maxed out again. What the hell? I tried to pause it, but the controls weren't responding. The pause button would highlight when I clicked it, but the music kept playing. Marcus was looking really uncomfortable now. "Dude, this is getting weird." I tried closing Apple Music completely, but it reopened on its own. Each time, Memoir Number 2 would start playing at full volume. The piano notes echoed through the empty rooms of the duplex, bouncing off the bare walls and making the whole place feel ice cold suddenly. "Screw this," I finally said, and shut the laptop completely. We both sighed with relief when the music stopped. But our relief lasted exactly 5 seconds. The same song started playing again, this time from my phone, which was in my pocket. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't connected it to the speaker, but somehow Memoir Number 2 was now blasting from my phone through the JBL speaker. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. The screen showed Apple Music was open and playing, but I hadn't opened the app. I tried to stop it, tried to close the app, even tried to turn off my phone, but nothing worked. The music kept playing, those haunting piano notes filling the empty space. Marcus was backing away toward the door. "Victor, let's get out of here, man. This isn't right." I wasn't about to argue. Something was seriously wrong, and every instinct was telling me to leave. But as I went to unplug the speaker, the music changed again, back to The Clash, Should I Stay or Should I Go? But only the chorus part, playing over and over. Should I stay or should I go now? Should I stay or should I go now? I'm not easily spooked, but in that moment, with the half-built walls around us and the only light coming from our construction lamps, it felt like something was directly communicating with us. The timing was too perfect, too deliberate. "We're definitely going," I said, unplugging the speaker and shoving it in my bag along with my laptop. My phone finally went silent when I disconnected the Bluetooth. We quickly gathered our tools, not even bothering to clean up properly. Mom would be pissed about the unfinished job, but there was no way we were staying another minute. The whole time we were packing up, I kept feeling like something was watching us from the empty doorways or the shadows in the corners. The temporary lights flickered a few times, which they'd never done before. Neither of us spoke much as we locked up the site. The security system we'd been installing was ironically only half done, but at that point, I didn't care if someone broke in and stole all our equipment. We just needed to get out. We caught the last bus home since neither of us had driven that day. Marcus's phone had died earlier from low battery, so he'd been using mine to check the bus schedule. We sat in the back of the nearly empty bus, both still freaked out. About halfway through the ride, Marcus suddenly jolted in his seat. "What now?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "My phone just turned on," he said, staring at the device in his hand. It was completely dead. I tried to turn it on before we left the site and nothing happened. Now it's at 30% battery. "Maybe it was just being glitchy," I suggested, not believing it myself. "No way, man. It was dead. And look at this." He showed me his screen. His music app was open. Not Apple Music, but Spotify. And it was paused on Memoir Number 2, the same funeral song that had played on my devices. He'd never heard of the song either. We rode the rest of the way in silence. What could we even say? Nothing about this made any sense. The next day, I told my mom we needed to finish the security installation during daylight hours. I made up some excuse about the lighting being better for the detailed work. She didn't question it, thankfully. Marcus flat out refused to go back after sunset, and honestly, I don't blame him. We returned to the duplex the next morning with a couple other guys from the crew. Everything looked normal in the daylight, just an ordinary construction site. We checked all the electronics, the wiring, everything that might explain what happened. Nothing seemed out of place. The speaker worked normally, my laptop and phone showed no signs of any glitches, and Marcus's phone was functioning perfectly. I even looked up Memoir Number 2. It's a real song by a pianist named Dustin O'Halloran. Beautiful but melancholy, exactly the kind of thing you'd hear at a memorial service. I'd definitely never listened to it before that night, and neither had Marcus. We finished the security installation without any problems, and construction on the duplex continued as scheduled. No one else reported anything strange, and there haven't been any more incidents that I know of. But I still can't shake the feeling that something was there with us that night. Something intelligent enough to manipulate our devices, to choose specific songs, to communicate in its own way. Why it chose us, or that particular evening, I have no idea. I've looked into the history of the property, thinking maybe there was a death there or something, but it was just an empty lot before construction began. No record of anything tragic in that specific spot. Havenbrook has its share of local legends like any small town, but nothing connected to that location. Marcus won't talk about it anymore. He says he's put it behind him, but I notice he always makes sure he's off the site before dark now. Always. No exceptions. As for me, I still work late sometimes. Construction deadlines don't care about ghost stories, but never alone and never at that duplex. I've also stopped listening to music on job sites. Can't bring myself to use that JBL speaker anymore either. The duplex is almost finished now. Soon 2 families will move in and make it their home. Part of me wants to warn them, but what would I even say? Hey, welcome to your new home. By the way, your sound system might start playing funeral music on its own. Yeah, right. I don't know what happened that night. Maybe it was just some bizarre technical glitch affecting multiple devices simultaneously. Maybe someone was pranking us, though I can't figure out how they could have done it. Or maybe there was something else there in that empty duplex, something that wanted to communicate the only way it could, through our technology. Something that was asking us a question. Should I stay or should I go? I chose to go, and whatever it was, I hope it chose to go too. Story 7. I still don't have an explanation for everything that happened in that house. Sometimes I think about moving away from Oakwood Heights altogether, but something keeps me here. Maybe it's because I want answers, or maybe whatever is here doesn't want me to leave. Either way, I need to get this off my chest. It started about 7 years ago when I moved into my first house in Oakwood Heights. Nothing fancy. Just a 2-story colonial with 3 bedrooms that I got for a decent price. The realtor never mentioned anything unusual about the property, and I didn't think to ask. Why would I? I was 28, excited about my first home purchase, and completely unprepared for what would follow. The first few weeks were normal. I was settling in, unpacking boxes, arranging furniture. Then the knocks started. At first, I thought it was the pipes or the house settling. That's what everyone tells you when you hear strange noises, right? But these knocks had a pattern: 3 quick taps, pause, 2 slow ones. Always the same sequence, always from inside the walls of the master bedroom, always at 3 in the morning. I'd wake up, heart racing, and stare at that wall until sunrise. Nothing visibly moved, no one was there, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I started sleeping with the lights on like a child. Then came the footsteps. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor, and I'd hear someone walking up the stairs when I was home alone. Heavy steps, deliberate. I'd rush to check, convinced someone had broken in, but nobody was ever there. The stairs would be empty, the front door locked from the inside. One night, I was in the shower when I heard the bathroom door open. The shower curtain was opaque, so I couldn't see through it, but I heard the distinct sound of the door creaking open, then closing. "Hello?" I called out, but no one answered. When I pulled back the curtain, the bathroom was empty, the door closed just as I'd left it, but the mirror was fogged up with what looked like handprints dragged across it. Not normal condensation, actual finger marks, too large to be mine. I started documenting everything, setting up cameras, recording audio. Most of the time, I'd catch nothing, but occasionally the cameras would glitch exactly when something happened. The audio recordings were worse. Sometimes they'd pick up whispering beneath the static, words I couldn't quite make out no matter how many times I replayed them. About 6 months in, things escalated. I was sitting on my couch watching TV late one night. My feet were propped up on the coffee table and I was alone. No pets, no roommates. Suddenly I felt something brush against my right calf, like fingers lightly trailing across my skin. Before I could react, I felt what I can only describe as a wet tongue lick the back of my leg, from ankle to knee. I jumped up so fast I knocked over my drink. My heart was pounding as I frantically checked under the couch, behind the curtains, everywhere. Nothing. No one. I slept at a friend's house that night, too terrified to stay alone. When I reluctantly returned home the next day, all the kitchen cabinets were open, every single one. I knew I hadn't left them that way. The incident that still makes my skin crawl happened about a week later. I've always enjoyed singing. Nothing professional, just for fun. I was home alone, cooking dinner and singing along to music playing from my phone. In the middle of a chorus, I heard a female voice join in. It was faint at first, like someone singing from another room. I stopped, thinking it was coming from outside, but when I paused my music, the voice continued. It was singing the exact same song, with a haunting, ethereal quality. As I stood frozen in my kitchen, the voice grew closer, as if whoever, whatever, was walking toward me. I felt the air around me get cold, a pressure building in my ears like when you're underwater. The voice was right behind me now, and I could feel breath on my neck. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. Then I managed to whisper, "Stop." And it did. Immediately, the presence vanished, the temperature returned to normal, and I was alone again. I didn't sing in that house for a long time after that, but the strangest incident, the one that still defies any rational explanation, involved my bedroom wardrobe. It was a massive oak piece, incredibly heavy. It had taken 3 men to carry it upstairs when I moved in. One morning I woke up to find it had fallen forward and rotated 90 degrees from its original position. It was now lying flat on the floor, partially on top of my bed, the corner pressing into the mattress where my legs would have been if I'd slept in the center. The bizarre thing, I heard nothing in the night. No crash, no dragging sound. Something that heavy should have made an enormous noise when it fell, but there was nothing. My bedroom door had been closed and I was a light sleeper, especially with all the paranormal activity making me jumpy. There's no way I would have slept through that wardrobe crashing down. My friend Mike came over to help me lift it back into place. It took both of us straining with all our might to move it just a few inches. As we were struggling, the corner of the wardrobe tore through my mattress, leaving a 6-inch gash in the fabric. "How the hell did this fall without ripping your bed to shreds?" Mike asked, examining the tear we'd just created. I had no answer. If the wardrobe had actually fallen naturally, the damage would have been extensive, but there wasn't a single mark on the mattress from its supposed fall, only from us moving it back. That night, after Mike left, I sat on my repaired bed and spoke out loud to the empty room. "What do you want from me?" I asked. The lights flickered once and I heard those 3 quick knocks followed by 2 slow ones from inside my closet. I didn't sleep that night. I ended up moving out 3 months later. Not because of the paranormal activity, though that was definitely a factor. I'd gotten a new job across town and used that as an excuse to find a different place. My second house in Oakwood Heights was newer, built in the 90s with no apparent history. For a while, things were quiet, normal. I started to think maybe the old house had been the problem, not the area. Then my grandmother died. We'd been close. She practically raised me after my parents' divorce. She passed away from cancer, a long, painful battle that still hurts to think about. The morning after her funeral, something strange happened. I went grocery shopping, not with any list or plan, just wandering the aisles in a grief-induced haze. I found myself buying a bag of Pink Lady apples, which was odd because I usually bought Granny Smith or Honeycrisp. I'd never purchased Pink Lady before, but something compelled me to that day. When I mentioned this to my aunt a few days later, she got very quiet. "Those were your grandmother's favorite," she finally said. "She ate one every day for as long as I can remember." I had no conscious memory of this preference. My grandmother had lived in another state for the last decade of her life, and I hadn't seen her eat an apple in years. But somehow I'd been drawn to buy exactly her favorite variety. That night I was awakened by a sound beside my bed, plastic crinkling, like someone unwrapping a package. It was around 2 in the morning and my room was dark. I froze, listening. The sound came again, distinct and close, right next to where I lay. I could sense a presence standing there, though I couldn't see anything in the darkness. The air felt charged, like before a thunderstorm. I smelled her perfume, the distinctive lavender scent my grandmother always wore. "Grandma?" I whispered. The crinkling stopped. The presence remained for several more seconds. Then I felt it withdraw. The perfume lingered until morning. When I got up, my foot landed on something that hadn't been there the night before, a small piece of bubble wrap. It was right where I'd heard the crinkling sound, exactly where I felt the presence had stood. I never used bubble wrap in my packing. I hadn't opened any packages recently. It appeared literally overnight, in the exact spot where I'd sensed my grandmother's spirit. I kept that piece of bubble wrap. It's in my desk drawer now. Sometimes when I miss her, I take it out and feel comforted knowing that somehow she found a way to visit me one last time. But the activity in my house didn't stop there. If anything, it seemed like one door had opened and now multiple entities were coming through. Objects began disappearing and reappearing in strange places. My keys ending up in the refrigerator, my watch found inside a sealed cereal box. Doors I specifically remembered closing would be wide open minutes later. Last month, I was doing laundry in the basement when all the lights went out. Not just in the basement, the entire house. I used my phone's flashlight to check the circuit breaker, but before I could reach it, I heard something moving in the dark corner of the basement. Heavy breathing, not human, more animal-like, but deeper than any pet I'd ever heard. I swung my light toward the sound, but whatever was there stayed just beyond the beam's reach. I could see its shadow, enormous and shifting on the wall. Then it growled, a low rumbling sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I ran upstairs, fumbling with the basement door lock. As I turned the key, something slammed against the other side of the door, hard enough to make the wood bend inward. I fell backwards, scrambling away across the kitchen floor. The door shuddered with 3 more impacts. Then everything went silent. A minute later, the lights came back on throughout the house. When I finally worked up the courage to open the basement door, there was nothing there. No marks on the door, no evidence of anything unusual. But something had changed. The atmosphere in my house feels different now. heavier somehow. I constantly feel watched. Last week I woke up with 3 long scratches down my back that I can't explain. They burned like fire and took days to fade. I'm still living in that house. I don't know what to do or who to turn to. Moving didn't help last time, and I'm beginning to think whatever this is, it's attached to me, not the property. I've tried blessing the house, using sage, even had a local paranormal group investigate. They caught some EVPs and unusual temperature drops, but nothing conclusive. Sometimes I wonder if my grandmother's visit somehow amplified whatever was already here, or maybe opened a door I don't know how to close. All I know is that last night I heard singing again, the same female voice from years ago, getting closer and closer until I felt breath on my neck. I'm afraid to sleep, afraid to stay awake, afraid that whatever haunts Oakwood Heights has claimed me for good. Story 8. I can't sleep. I haven't slept right in 3 days. Every time I close my eyes, I see it standing there in my doorway. I keep the lights on now. My parents think I'm just going through some teen phase, but they don't understand what happened that night. Nobody does. I need to write this down before I convince myself it wasn't real. I'm 16. This happened just last Saturday at my house in Blackwood Heights. It's usually a quiet neighborhood where nothing ever happens, typical suburban place with decent-sized houses and everyone keeping to themselves. My parents' bedroom is across the hall from mine, and my little sister's room is at the end of the hallway. That night, everyone was asleep except me. It was around 2 in the morning, and I was up playing Bloodborne on my PS4. I know I should have been sleeping since I had a track meet the next day, but I'd been stuck on this one boss for days and was determined to beat it. My room was dark except for the glow of my TV, and I had my headphones on so I wouldn't wake anyone up. I remember feeling anxious that night, more than usual. School had been rough that week. Failed a math test, got into an argument with my best friend Jake, and Coach Bennett had been riding me hard about my times dropping. Everything just felt heavy, like I was carrying around this weight I couldn't put down. I was so focused on the game that I almost missed it at first. This weird flicker in my peripheral vision. Like when the power stutters for a half second, but it wasn't the lights since they were already off. It was more like the darkness itself flickered. I paused the game and took off my headphones, listening. The house was completely silent except for the hum of my console. That's when I felt it, this feeling of being watched. Not like when you're paranoid and imagine eyes on you. This was different. It was a certainty, a physical sensation like pressure on my skin. The air in my room felt different too. Heavier, colder, like the atmosphere right before a thunderstorm. I tried to shake it off. Told myself it was just my imagination working overtime from the creepy game. I unpaused and went back to fighting the boss. My hands were sweaty on the controller and I kept messing up dodges I normally nailed. Then my character died, and the screen went dark for those few seconds while it reloaded. In that moment of darkness, I looked up toward my doorway. That's when I saw it. Standing in my doorway was this figure. Tall, taller than any person should be. Its head nearly touched the top of the doorframe, which is at least 7 feet. It was humanoid, but wrong in ways that are hard to explain. Its proportions were off, limbs too long and thin. It didn't have features I could make out clearly, just this darker shape against the darkness of the hallway. The worst part wasn't how it looked, though. It was how it felt. Have you ever been alone somewhere and suddenly felt that you weren't? That crawling sensation on the back of your neck? This was that feeling multiplied by 1,000. My entire body went cold, and I couldn't breathe. I should have screamed. I should have pulled the covers over my head or called for my parents. But I didn't do any of those things. Instead, I did something I still can't explain. Something that makes no sense to me even now. I got up and walked toward it. It wasn't like I was possessed or anything. I was terrified, absolutely terrified. But something compelled me forward, like I needed to confront whatever this was. My legs moved almost on their own accord. Each step felt like moving through syrup, the air thick and resistant. As I got closer, the figure didn't move. It just waited. The darkness around it seemed to pulse slightly, like it was breathing. I could make out more details the closer I got, how its arms hung too low, nearly to its knees, how it seemed to sway slightly, even though it was standing still, how the darkness of its form wasn't solid but shifting like smoke held in a human shape. I stopped about 2 feet away from it. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. My breath came in short, shallow gasps. Every instinct was screaming at me to run, but I didn't. I just stood there, staring up at this thing that shouldn't exist. Then I did the unthinkable. I stepped forward again, and directly into it. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I thought I'd pass right through it and prove it wasn't real. Maybe some part of me needed to know what would happen. Whatever the reason, I stepped forward until we occupied the same space. And then everything changed. The moment I stepped into it, the world shifted. I wasn't in my hallway anymore. I wasn't anywhere I recognized. It's so hard to describe what I experienced because it wasn't like any place that exists in our reality. It was like being in a space between spaces. Colors that shouldn't exist swirled around me. Distances made no sense. Things that seemed close were impossibly far away, and things that seemed distant were right beside me. There was no up or down, no left or right. Gravity felt wrong, like I was being pulled in multiple directions at once, and I wasn't alone there. I could sense other presences all around me, not just the entity from my doorway, but countless others. I couldn't see them clearly, just impressions and movements in my peripheral vision that vanished when I tried to focus on them. But I could feel them watching me, curious about this human who had wandered into their realm. Time didn't work right there either. I know logically I was only gone for seconds, maybe a minute at most, but it felt like hours. Hours of floating in this impossible space, surrounded by entities I couldn't comprehend, unable to scream or move or do anything but exist in a place where I shouldn't exist. The worst part was the feelings that washed over me. Emotions that weren't mine flooded through me. Ancient grief, hungering curiosity, cold amusement, and something else. Something like recognition, like whatever these things were, they knew me somehow, had always known me. Then, as suddenly as it happened, I was back in my hallway, gasping for breath, and collapsed on my knees. The entity was gone. The house was normal again, but I wasn't. I ran to my parents' room and shook them awake, sobbing and trying to explain what had happened. They thought I'd had a nightmare. How could they think anything else? My dad checked the house while my mom sat with me, telling me it was just a bad dream from playing that violent game too late. But it wasn't a dream. The chills stayed in my bones for hours, and when I finally calmed down enough to go back to my room, with all the lights on and my dad checking under the bed like I was 5, I noticed something on my arm, these faint branching marks like frost patterns on a window. They faded by morning, but I know what I saw. Since that night, I've been researching non-stop, trying to understand what happened to me. I think what I experienced was a bleed-through from what I've started calling the hidden veil, a sort of parallel realm that exists alongside ours but is normally invisible to us. I believe this realm is created by trauma and suffering, like the collective negative energy of humanity has formed its own dimension, and the entities there feed on that energy. I've found obscure forums where others have encountered similar things, always when they're in emotionally vulnerable states. One person described seeing a tall figure during a deep depression. Another saw something watching them the night after their mother died. It's like these entities are drawn to negative emotions the way sharks are drawn to blood in water. My theory is that my anxiety that night, all that stress and frustration, opened a temporary portal of sorts. It allowed this entity to manifest in my doorway and, when I stepped into it, to momentarily pull me through into its realm. What terrifies me most is that I think it's still watching me. Sometimes I'll catch that same flicker in the corner of my eye. My room gets cold for no reason, even with the heater on. And twice now, I've woken up at exactly 2:17 in the morning, the exact time on my clock when I encountered the entity, with that same feeling of being watched. I haven't told my parents about the continuing experiences. They already think I'm being dramatic about a nightmare. but I know what I saw and what I felt. That place beyond the entity was real, and sometimes I can still feel its pull, like it's waiting for me to step through again. Last night, I woke up suddenly and saw my doorknob turning slowly, even though everyone was asleep. I watched, paralyzed, as my door opened inch by inch, revealing the dark hallway beyond, but nothing entered. The door just stayed open, like an invitation. I don't know what to do. I'm sleeping with my lights on and my door locked now. I've started leaving my TV on for background noise because the silence makes the watching feeling worse. I've even started wearing a cross necklace my grandmother gave me years ago, though I'm not sure it helps. Whatever that entity was, whatever that place was, it changed something fundamental about how I see reality. The world feels thinner now, like if I look at it from the right angle, I might see through to what's behind it all. And that terrifies me more than anything. The idea that our world is just a thin skin over something vast and incomprehensible that occasionally reaches through. I don't expect anyone to believe me. I'm not sure I would believe it if someone else told me this story. But I know what happened, I know what I felt, and I know that the hidden veil is real, that the entities behind it are real, and that sometimes, if you're unlucky enough, they notice you watching back. I just wish I knew why it chose me and what it wants, because I'm certain of one thing: it's not done with me yet. Story 9. I still can't sleep well most nights. It's been almost 8 months since everything happened, but I can't shake the images from my head or the smell from my memory. I've never told this story publicly before, but I need to get it out somewhere. Maybe someone here has experienced something similar and can help me make sense of it all. It started last October when me, Kyle, Steve and Ross decided to head out to the woods outside Millbrook to watch the meteor shower. We'd been there a few times before during the day, but never at night. The area is pretty dense with trees, but there's this one clearing that gives you a perfect view of the sky. It's about a 40-minute hike from where we usually park. That night was clear, perfect for stargazing. We brought some beers, our sleeping bags, and enough snacks to last us the night. Everything was normal at first. We were laughing, talking about random shit, and just enjoying being away from the city lights. The meteors started showing up around 11:30, and we were all lying on our backs watching them streak across the sky. I don't know why, but at some point I got this weird feeling. It wasn't like someone was watching us. It was more specific than that. I felt drawn to look at this particular spot up on a small ridge overlooking where we were sitting. I can't explain it. It was like when someone's staring at you and you just know it. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it toward that spot, and I swear to God I saw a pair of eyes reflecting back. They were glowing yellow-green like a dog's or cat's eyes in the dark, but they were positioned way too high off the ground to be any normal animal from around here, maybe 5 or 6 feet up. Steve noticed me staring and asked what I was looking at. All I could mumble was, maybe a caveman, which made no sense. But I was genuinely freaked out. Ross laughed it off, thinking I was just messing around or seeing things. When I looked back a few seconds later, the eyes had lowered to the ground and were moving away like a dog would. I tried to convince myself it was just a deer or something, but deer don't stand that tall, and their eyes don't glow quite like that. Plus, the way it moved, it wasn't natural. We stayed until around 2 in the morning, and I didn't mention it again. I didn't want to freak everyone out, and I figured maybe it was just my imagination or the beers playing tricks on me. Fast forward 2 weeks, I convinced a bigger group to go back to that same forest. There were 6 of us this time. I don't know why I wanted to return. Part of me wanted to prove to myself that I'd just been seeing things that night. At some point, Steve and I split from the group to explore this narrow path that went deeper into the woods. It was darker there, the trees more dense. We didn't get too far before we noticed some music and a light in the distance. We figured maybe some people were drinking or camping nearby, so we walked toward it to check it out. Nothing came of it. We couldn't find the source. But on our way back to rejoin our friends, we took a slightly different route, and that's when we first smelled it. If you've never smelled decomposition before, consider yourself lucky. It's not just bad, it's wrong. It violates something in your brain. This smell was overwhelming, like something had been dead for at least a day or two. Steve gagged immediately. I covered my nose with my shirt. We both assumed it was just some dead animal. Maybe a deer that got taken down by coyotes or something. We didn't investigate. We just got the hell out of there and went back to our friends. We didn't even mention it to them because, honestly, finding dead animals in the woods isn't exactly unusual. I quit my job about 2 months after that. The place was toxic and I needed a break. This meant I had a lot more free time, which probably wasn't the best thing for me. One night in December, I was walking home with my best friend and this other guy, Jim. We'd been at a party and it was maybe 1 in the morning. I don't know why, but I started telling them about the eyes I saw in the forest that night. The memory had been bothering me for weeks. My best friend thought I was just being dramatic, but Jim seemed genuinely interested. He suggested we go back to the forest right then. I know it sounds crazy to go into the woods at 1 in the morning in December, but we were a bit drunk and I really wanted to show someone the spot where I'd seen those eyes. We took the same path that Steve and I had taken before. It was even darker this time. No moon, just our phone flashlights. About halfway down the path, we smelled something again. Not exactly like before. This was different, but still unmistakably the smell of something rotting. Jim and I looked at each other. My best friend was hanging back, saying we should turn around, but Jim and I were curious. We followed the smell, which got stronger as we moved off the path. That's when we saw it. Something was partially buried under some rocks, but it was a half-assed job, like someone had tried to hide it quickly. The rocks were piled in an unnatural way, and there was disturbed soil around them. I don't know what possessed me, but I picked up a rock and started digging. The smell got worse with each scoop of dirt I moved. Jim was right beside me, his phone flashlight illuminating what I was uncovering. When I saw what it was, I froze. It wasn't an animal. The first thing I uncovered was what looked like a human shoulder, with what appeared to be a woman's coat on it. The fabric was dirty and decomposed, but you could still make out the pattern. Jim freaked out. He actually reached down and touched it, then immediately regretted it. He started pouring water from his bottle over his hands, trying to wash away any fingerprints. My best friend finally came over to see what we'd found, and he just stood there in shock. We all agreed we needed to leave. Jim insisted we throw away the rock I'd used for digging, worried about fingerprints. We tossed it deep into the woods and got out of there as fast as we could. On the walk back, we debated what to do. Should we call the police? What if they thought we had something to do with it? None of us had criminal records, but we were scared. We decided to leave it alone. Someone else would find it eventually, we figured. It was a stupid decision made out of fear, and I've regretted it every day since. The next few months were hell. I started having nightmares almost every night. In them, I was back at that spot, but I was being forced to dig deeper. Sometimes there would be someone standing over me, watching, but I could never see their face. Jim was having similar dreams. We'd text each other at 3 or 4 in the morning, both of us awake and terrified. He said he kept hearing running footsteps in his apartment when no one was there. Strange things started happening to me too. I bought a new car in January, and the radio would turn on and off by itself, even when the car was locked and powered down. I'd come outside in the morning to find it playing static at full volume. The dealership couldn't find anything wrong with it. One night in March, I was alone in my room when my phone rang at 11:46. I remember the time exactly because I checked it, wondering who would call so late. There was no caller ID. When I answered, there was silence at first, then a man's voice, deep and unnervingly calm, said, "I burnt it down." Then I heard laughter in the background, distant at first, but getting louder and louder until it was like it was right in my ear. It was so loud that my mum and sister heard it from their rooms and came to check on me. I asked who was calling, and the laughter suddenly changed to crying, this awful, pained sobbing that made my skin crawl. I hung up and turned my phone off. I've tried to rationalize everything. Maybe what we found wasn't actually a body. Maybe it was some kind of hunter's trash or discarded clothes, but I know what I saw, and I know what I smelled, and those eyes in the forest that night. They weren't animal eyes. I've thought about going to the police countless times, but what would I say? Months ago, I found what might have been a body, but I left it there and didn't report it. And what about all the weird shit that's happened since? They'd think I was crazy or on drugs. The worst part is not knowing. Not knowing who that person was, how they ended up there, or who put them there, and not knowing if whatever I saw that night with those eyes has some connection to it all. I moved away from Millbrook last month. I couldn't take being so close to those woods anymore. But sometimes, even in my new apartment, I'll wake up at night and smell that decay for just a split second before it vanishes. And occasionally, my phone will ring with no caller ID, and I let it go to voicemail every time. I don't know what we unleashed or disturbed that night in the forest, but I know it followed us out. Story 10. I still can't sleep without my bedroom lights on. Even with my new apartment, new job, and therapy sessions twice a month, I can't shake what happened at that trailer in Pinewood. It's been 8 months, and I still wake up in cold sweats, checking the time to make sure it's not 3 in the morning. I'd just turned 27 when I moved into that 3-bedroom trailer. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. The first place I'd ever lived completely alone. Well, not completely alone. I had my 2 cats, Luna and Midnight. They were my babies, my comfort when things got rough. I'd just gone through a nasty breakup and needed a fresh start. Pinewood seemed perfect. Quiet community, affordable rent, and far enough away from my ex that I wouldn't accidentally run into him at the grocery store. The first few days were normal. I unpacked, arranged furniture, hung pictures. I placed my vanity mirror across from my bed like I always had in previous places. It was this antique full-length mirror I'd found at a yard sale years ago. Beautiful carved wooden frame, slightly tarnished glass that gave everything a vintage look. I loved that mirror. By the 5th night, things started feeling off. I'd be washing dishes and suddenly feel like someone was standing right behind me. I'd spin around, but there was nothing there, just Luna staring at me from the countertop with those judgy cat eyes. I brushed it off as new house jitters, but then the tapping started, just light taps, like fingernails on wood, coming from different parts of the trailer at night. I'd get up to check, thinking maybe a branch was hitting the side of the trailer or one of the cats was scratching something, but I never found anything. I've always been a bad sleeper, so I started taking melatonin to help me fall asleep faster. But no matter what time I went to bed, I kept waking up at exactly 3 a.m. Not like 3:01 or 3:02, exactly 3. My phone would read 300 when I'd jolt awake, heart pounding, covered in sweat. I'd have these horrible nightmares where I was trying to run out of this dark house, but something I couldn't see, would grab my ankles and drag me back inside. After about 2 weeks of this, I was starting to lose it. The bags under my eyes were so bad, my co-workers asked if I was okay. I kept telling myself it was just stress, just the adjustment to living alone. Then it happened. I was lying in bed, almost asleep, that weird floating feeling you get right before you drop off, and I heard it, clear as day, a child's voice saying hello right next to my ear. I shot up, turned on my bedside lamp, and checked the entire trailer. Nothing. No one. Just my cats looking at me like I was crazy. I tried to rationalize it. I'd read about hypnagogic hallucinations before, those weird sounds or images you can experience when falling asleep. That had to be it, right? Just my brain playing tricks on me. The next night was when things got so much worse. I was up late watching TV in the living room. Around midnight, I noticed Luna sitting in the hallway, staring fixedly at my bedroom doorway. Her back was arched and her tail was all puffed up. Midnight was hiding under the couch, which wasn't like him at all. "What's wrong, baby?" I asked Luna, but she wouldn't look at me, just kept staring at that doorway like she was seeing something I couldn't. I felt a chill run down my spine, but tried to ignore it. I went to bed about an hour later, taking an extra melatonin because I was so wound up. I remember checking my phone. It was 12:45 when I finally drifted off. 3 a.m. I woke up gasping. The air in my room felt heavy, like it was pressing down on my chest. It was cold, way colder than the rest of the trailer should have been, even with the AC running. But the worst part was the feeling. This overwhelming sense that I wasn't alone, that something was in my room with me, watching me. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I just lay there, eyes darting around the dark room trying to make out shapes. My eyes kept getting drawn to the mirror, which reflected the darkness back at me. For a split second, I swear I'm not making this up, I thought I saw something move in the reflection. Not me, not the cats, something else. When I finally managed to reach for my lamp, the feeling broke. The room warmed up, the pressure lifted, and I could breathe again, but I knew something was wrong, really wrong. The next day, I called in sick to work. I hadn't slept more than maybe 2 hours, and I was a complete wreck. I spent the morning Googling signs of haunting and what to do if your house is haunted. Most of it seemed like nonsense, but I was desperate. Around noon, I remembered there was this little crystal shop downtown, the kind of place that sells sage bundles and healing stones. I'd passed it a few times, but never gone in. I decided it couldn't hurt. The shop was exactly what you'd expect. Dream catchers hanging from the ceiling, shelves of crystals, that heavy incense smell. I was just looking at some protection stones when this older woman approached me. She had gray hair pulled back in a braid and these intense blue eyes that seemed to look right through me. "You've got trouble at home," she said. Not a question, a statement. I hadn't told anyone about what was happening, hadn't posted about it online, hadn't mentioned it to co-workers. Nothing. "How did you know?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can see it all over you. Something's attached itself to you, or rather, to something you own." She asked if she could read my energy, and at this point, I was willing to try anything. She held her hands near me, not touching, just hovering around my head and shoulders. Her eyes closed and her face scrunched up like she was concentrating hard. "It's a mirror," she said after a minute. "You have a mirror that's acting as a portal. I can see purple and green energies swirling through it." My blood ran cold. The vanity mirror, the one across from my bed. "Can you help me?" I asked, not even caring how desperate I sounded. She nodded and sold me a smudging spray. I couldn't use real sage because of my cats, and some black tourmaline stones. She also did what she called a remote closing of the portal, visualizing it sealing shut. I didn't know if I believed in any of this stuff, but I was willing to try anything. As I was paying, something made me mention my teenage years, how I used to be obsessed with Ouija boards. My friends and I would use them nearly every weekend, trying to contact spirits. I remembered how, during that period, my whole family started seeing what we called shadow people in our house. CDs would fly off shelves, closet doors would open by themselves. My mom eventually found my Ouija board and burned it, and things calmed down. The woman's face got really serious. "The boards themselves aren't usually the problem," she said, "but using them repeatedly can weaken the barriers between worlds. It's like poking holes in a fence. Eventually, things can get through, and once they know you, once they've connected with you, they can find you again." She recommended I cover the mirror immediately and spray my entire trailer, focusing on doorways and windows. She also suggested I have someone stay with me for a few nights. I drove home in a daze, stopping to call my friend Amber to see if she could come over. I didn't tell her exactly why, just that I was having trouble sleeping alone in the new place. Bless her, she agreed without too many questions. When I got home, the first thing I did was throw a sheet over that mirror. I couldn't even look at it directly. Then I went through the entire trailer with the smudging spray, saying the protection words the woman had taught me. I placed the black tourmaline stones in each room, including one under my pillow. Amber arrived around 7, and we made dinner, watched a movie, tried to keep things normal. I didn't tell her exactly what was going on, just said I'd been having nightmares and feeling uneasy. I think she assumed it was related to my breakup. That night, I slept through until morning for the first time in weeks. No 3 a.m. wake-up, no feeling of being watched, just blessed, normal sleep. It's been 8 months since I moved out of that trailer. I left the mirror behind, covered with the sheet, told the landlord they could keep it or trash it. I didn't care. I've never used a Ouija board again, and I never will. Sometimes I still wonder what it was that found me through that mirror. Was it something I'd contacted years ago with the Ouija board? Was it something that had always been in that trailer, and the mirror just gave it away to show itself? I don't know. All I know is that I still sleep with a nightlight. I still wake up sometimes, heart racing, convinced I heard a child's voice saying hello. And I still check the time, relieved when it's not 3 a.m. I don't know if anyone else has experienced anything like this. Sometimes I think maybe I was just stressed, maybe it was all in my head. But then I remember how Luna stared at that empty doorway, back arched, seeing something I couldn't see. And I know it was real. Whatever it was, I hope it stayed behind with that mirror. But sometimes, when I catch my reflection in a window or a store display, I can't help but look twice, just to make sure it's really me looking back. Story 11. I still get chills thinking about what happened that day during freshman year. We were just 15 years old, messing around like kids do, but what we experienced out in those hills, I don't think any of us has been the same since. It was early November, maybe 7 years ago now. My friend Jake's parents owned this huge property about 30 minutes outside of town, like a small ranch with a lot of undeveloped land stretching into these dry, scrubby hills. His dad was some kind of investment banker who bought the place as a weekend retreat, but they barely used half of it. We'd go there sometimes on weekends to hang out since there was so much space and zero supervision. That Saturday, 4 of us, me, Jake, Corey, and Marcus, had planned an airsoft war. Jake's parents were away on business and his older brother was supposed to be watching us, but he just stayed inside playing video games all day. We'd been shooting at each other for hours in this little valley behind Jake's house, running between trees and diving behind these small dirt mounds. It was awesome. By late afternoon, we were sweaty, covered in welts, and getting bored. That's when Jake mentioned the back trails. "Hey, you guys want to see something cool?" he asked, that mischievous grin spreading across his face. "My dad got this golf cart thing for the property. We could take it out to the back hills." None of us had been out there before. Jake said his dad didn't like him going beyond certain boundaries of the property, especially alone, because of rattlesnakes and the rough terrain, but Jake had secretly explored parts of it before and knew how to drive the cart. "There's all these weird old structures back there from when this was ranch land," he explained, "like actual abandoned buildings and stuff. Of course we were in. What 15-year-old boy wouldn't want to explore forbidden territory?" We piled our airsoft guns into this beat-up utility golf cart parked in their shed. It was bigger than a regular golf cart, more like those maintenance vehicles you see at actual golf courses, with a small truck bed in the back. It had these chunky off-road tires and could actually move pretty fast. Jake drove, I rode shotgun, and Corey and Marcus squeezed into the back. We headed out past the manicured part of the property, through this gate and a barbed wire fence, and suddenly we were on these narrow dirt paths winding through hills covered in dry brush and scrubby trees. The sun was starting to get low, but we figured we had a good hour of daylight left. We kept going deeper into the hills, bouncing over rocks and ruts, all of us laughing whenever someone nearly fell out. The trails got narrower, the brush thicker. After about 20 minutes, we'd gone further than Jake had ever been before. "Dude, I think we should head back soon," Marcus said, always the cautious one. "It's gonna get dark." "Just a little further," Jake insisted. "I want to see what's over that ridge." We came around a bend and saw another fence ahead. This one chain link with these faded "no trespassing" signs. The fence looked old and was sagging in places, but definitely more serious than the barbed wire one near the house. "Is this still your dad's property?" I asked Jake. He shrugged. "Honestly, I'm not sure. Maybe. He owns a lot of land out here." The fence ran along the trail for about 50 yards before we spotted a gate that was partially open, the chain that once secured it hanging loose. Beyond it, we could see what looked like an old building. We stopped the cart and got out to look. Through the brush, about 100 feet past the gate, sat a small, dilapidated structure. It wasn't big, maybe the size of a double-wide trailer, with peeling paint and boarded windows. "What is that place?" Corey asked, peering through the fence. "Dunno," Jake replied. "Probably some old ranch office or something. Want to check it out?" Marcus immediately protested. "Those signs are there for a reason, man. Plus, it's getting dark." He was right. The sun was dipping behind the hills now, casting long shadows across everything. But there was still enough light, and we'd already come this far. "Come on, we'll be quick," Jake said, already pushing through the gate. "Just a peek inside, and then we'll head back." Corey followed him without hesitation. Marcus and I exchanged glances, but the peer pressure was real. We grabbed our airsoft pistols, not because we thought we'd need them, but because 15-year-old boys don't leave their toys behind, and reluctantly followed. The ground was different here, harder, with these patches of cracked concrete poking through the dirt. As we approached the building, I felt this weird heaviness in the air, like when a thunderstorm is coming, but there wasn't a cloud in the sky. The building looked even worse up close. The wood was rotting in places, and there was this smell. Not just old building smell, but something else, something sour and wrong that made my nose wrinkle. "This place is creepy as hell," I muttered. Jake found a door that was hanging partially open and pushed it wider. The hinges creaked so perfectly it was like something from a horror movie, which made us all laugh nervously. "Hello?" Jake called out, his voice echoing slightly. "Dude, shut up," Marcus hissed. "What if someone's actually in there?" "Nobody's been here in years," Jake said, but he lowered his voice anyway. Inside was exactly what you'd expect from an abandoned building. Dust, cobwebs, some old metal desks pushed against walls, broken chairs. The windows were boarded up, but enough light filtered through cracks to see. There were papers scattered everywhere, yellowed with age. Jake picked one up. "Livestock records," he said, squinting at the faded type, from like the 1970s. We wandered around for maybe 5 minutes. It was just an old office, nothing special, no treasures, no mysteries, just decay and dirt and that weird smell getting stronger toward the back rooms. "This place sucks," Corey announced. "Let's go." That's when we heard it, a clicking sound coming from outside, not mechanical, more organic, like someone rapidly clacking their teeth or fingernails together. Click, 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 click. We froze, listening. It was coming from the bushes beyond the building, on the other side of a small clearing. "What is that?" Marcus whispered. "Probably just a bird or something," Jake said, but I could tell he was spooked. The clicking stopped, then started again, faster. Click, 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 click. "Let's get out of here," I said. No one argued. We moved quickly back to the door, trying not to run, but definitely not wasting time. Outside, the sun had dipped further, leaving the area in deep twilight. The clicking was louder now, and we could tell it was coming from a dense patch of bushes about 50 feet away, near another section of the fence. "Just walk normal to the cart," Jake whispered. "Don't run." We started walking, trying to look casual, even though my heart was pounding. We were about halfway to the gate when the clicking suddenly stopped. The silence felt worse somehow. Then we heard movement in the bushes, not small movement, big, deliberate movement. Branches breaking, leaves rustling. "Run!" someone shouted. "Maybe me, I don't even remember." We bolted for the gate, not looking back. Just as we reached it, the most horrific sound cut through the air. A screech that was neither animal nor human, but something in between. High-pitched and guttural at the same time, like someone screaming through a broken synthesizer. I risked a glance back and saw the fence near the bushes shaking violently, like something was hitting it from the other side. Hard. We piled into the cart, Jake fumbling with the keys. "Come on, come on, come on," he muttered. The cart started just as we heard the fence give way with a metallic snap. Jake floored it, the little engine whining as we shot forward down the trail. The path back was narrower than I remembered, with brush scraping both sides of the cart. We were bouncing wildly over the uneven ground, holding on for dear life. Behind us, that clicking sound had returned, but it was moving, following us through the brush alongside the trail. "What the hell is that?" Corey screamed, twisting around in his seat. "Just keep driving," Marcus yelled at Jake. The cart hit a rut and nearly tipped, forcing Jake to slow down slightly. That's when I saw it, or part of it, moving through the brush to our right. It was tall, at least 6 feet, but hunched over. In the fading light, its skin or hide looked brownish, maybe scaled. It was hard to tell. But what I'll never forget were the hands. These terrifyingly long fingers ending in curved claws, stained with what looked like dried blood or rust. It moved in this jerky, unnatural way, keeping pace with us about 15 feet off the trail. "Shoot it!" Jake screamed, seeing it too. In pure panic, Marcus and Corey started firing their airsoft guns at it. The plastic BBs just bounced off or got lost in the brush. The thing didn't even seem to notice. The clicking got faster, angrier. Then the thing lunged closer to the trail, and for just a second, I caught a glimpse of its face in a gap between bushes. I wish to God I hadn't. It wasn't a face in any normal sense. Just these holes where features should be, and a mouth that seemed too wide, too full of jagged, misaligned teeth. I think I screamed. We all probably screamed. Jake pushed the cart to its limit, the engine shrieking in protest. We hit another bump, and my airsoft gun went flying out into the brush. Then suddenly we broke through into a more open area. The clicking stopped. When I looked back, there was nothing there, no movement in the brush, no sign of whatever had been chasing us. Jake didn't slow down. He drove that cart like a man possessed, taking the curves so fast I thought we'd flip for sure. Nobody spoke. We just held on, eyes wide, heads swiveling to check for any sign of pursuit. We made it back to the house in record time. The sun had fully set by then, leaving just the last purple glow on the horizon. We parked the cart in the shed and ran inside, locking every door and window. Jake's brother took one look at our faces and asked what happened. We couldn't even explain it coherently, just babbled about something chasing us from the old building in the back hills. "What building?" he asked, confused. "There's nothing back there but empty land for miles." We called our parents to come pick us up, making up some excuse about not feeling well. None of us wanted to stay there overnight anymore. While waiting, we huddled in the living room with all the lights on, jumping at every sound from outside. My dad arrived first. When I got in the car, he immediately asked what was wrong, said I looked like I'd seen a ghost. I just told him I was tired and wanted to go home. We never talked about what happened, the 4 of us. Not the next day at school, not ever. It was like we had this unspoken agreement to pretend it never occurred. But sometimes I'd catch one of them looking at me in the hallway, and I could tell they were thinking about it too. I've researched local wildlife extensively since then. Nothing native to our area matches what we saw, not even close. Sometimes I wonder if we all just scared ourselves, if the fading light and our teenage imaginations turned some coyote or mountain lion into a monster. But then I remember those hands, those impossibly long fingers with blood-stained claws, the clicking sound that still haunts my dreams, the face that wasn't a face. I'm 22 now, in college across the country. I've never been back to those hills, and as far as I know, neither have the others. Jake's family sold the property a year after it happened. I don't know if that's related. Sometimes I think about going back, just to see if the building is really there, to prove to myself that I didn't imagine it all. But then, I remember that sound, that terrible screeching, and I know I never will. Whatever was in those hills that day, I hope it stayed there, but part of me knows better. Part of me knows it's still out there, clicking in the darkness, waiting for more curious kids to wander too far from safety. Story 12. I never believed in ghosts until I moved into Oak Ridge Apartments back in 2013. It wasn't my first choice, but the rent was reasonable, and I needed a place quickly after my breakup. The complex was built sometime in the 90s on what used to be an old homestead. I only found out later from my neighbor, Mrs. Carlson, that the property had a bit of history. Apparently, the family cemetery had been relocated when they developed the land. They moved the headstones, but who knows if they got all the bodies, she told me while watering her plants one day. I laughed it off at the time. The first thing I noticed when I moved in was how everyone avoided walking on this one patch of grass near the office building. It wasn't marked or anything, but it was weirdly perfect, like unnaturally green and uniform compared to the rest of the lawn, which was patchy from people cutting across it. I didn't think much of it until I realized I was subconsciously avoiding it too. Something about that spot just felt wrong. I was there maybe 3 weeks when the weird stuff started. I was unpacking some books in my living room when something hard hit me in the back of the head. I turned around, thinking maybe a picture had fallen, but there was nothing there, nothing on the floor, nothing that could have hit me, just a sharp pain and the feeling of being watched. That night I heard humming, not like the air conditioning or the refrigerator, actual humming, like someone was humming a tune I couldn't quite place. I got up and checked the entire apartment, but I was alone. I tried to convince myself it was coming from another unit, but it sounded like it was right in my living room. The next morning I was making coffee when I saw movement out of the corner of my eye, a cat, grey and white, darting into my bedroom. I followed it, thinking one of the neighbor's cats had somehow gotten in, but when I got to the bedroom there was nothing there. No cat, no way for it to escape, just nothing. I called the property manager to ask if the previous tenant had a cat, thinking maybe I was seeing things because I was tired from the move. She told me the previous tenant was an elderly man who'd lived there for 8 years. He didn't have a cat, but his wife, who died in the apartment 5 years before he moved out, had loved cats. That's when the incidents started piling up. I'd wake up at 2 in the morning to the sound of a child giggling. My shower would turn on by itself. I'd come home to find drawers slightly open that I know I'd closed. Once, I found all my kitchen cabinet doors wide open when I woke up, though I'm certain they were closed when I went to bed. The thing that really freaked me out happened about 2 months in. I was reviewing photos I'd taken of my apartment to send to my mom. She wanted to see how I'd decorated. In the background of one photo, there was a man, just standing in the hallway to my bedroom. He was blurry, kind of transparent, but definitely there. Tall, wearing what looked like old work clothes. I'd been alone when I took that picture. I know I was. After that, I started talking to them. Sounds crazy, I know, but what else could I do? I couldn't afford to break my lease, and honestly, they hadn't done anything threatening besides that one time something hit my head. So one night, after finding my TV on again after I'd definitely turned it off, I just said out loud, "Look, I know you're here. This is my home now too. If you don't mess with me, I won't mess with you." The hitting in the head happened twice more that week. The third time I lost it and yelled, "I swear to God, if you do that again, I'm going to sage your ass out of existence." It never happened again after that. I never actually bought sage, didn't know the first thing about it. But I guess the threat was enough. I started documenting the weird occurrences. The ghost cat, I called him Mist, showed up at least once a week. The child's giggle became almost a regular 2 a.m. alarm clock. The humming was almost always a man's voice, and it was always the same tune, something old that I couldn't identify. Sometimes objects would move slightly. My keys would be on the coffee table instead of the hook by the door, or a book would be in a different position than I left it. My friends thought I was losing it. My sister refused to stay overnight after visiting once and claiming someone sat on the edge of her bed at 3 in the morning. My mom suggested carbon monoxide poisoning, but I got that checked. Levels were normal. My dad thought I was making it up for attention after the breakup. But Mrs. Carlson believed me. Apartment 23 has always been active, she told me one day. The man who lived there before you used to talk about his wife visiting him after she passed. Management doesn't like us talking about it because they're afraid it'll drive tenants away. By the 6-month mark, I'd gotten used to it. I'd come home from work, say, "I'm home" out loud like I was announcing myself to roommates, and go about my business. Sometimes I'd feel cold spots in the apartment or catch glimpses of movement, but it became almost normal. I even started to find it comforting in a weird way, like I was never really alone. That's why what happened with the pizza guy rattled me so much. It made everything real in a way it hadn't been before. It was a Friday night in October, about 8 months after I moved in. I ordered from Domino's like I did every other week. The same delivery guy usually came. Marco, a college student who'd been delivering to me since I moved in. We had a friendly rapport. He'd comment on whatever movie I was watching. I'd ask about his classes, that kind of thing. That night, I heard the knock and opened the door to find Marco with my pizza. He greeted me with his usual, "Hey, how's it going?" And I responded while digging in my pocket for a tip. But mid-conversation, he just stopped talking. His eyes fixed on something over my shoulder, inside my apartment. The color drained from his face. I mean completely. He went ghost white in seconds. I turned to look behind me but didn't see anything unusual. When I turned back, Marco was visibly shaking. His hand with the pizza box was trembling so hard I thought he might drop it. "You okay?" I asked him. He swallowed hard and whispered, "Are you alone in there?" The way he asked it, his voice shaking, eyes wide with fear, made my skin crawl. I nodded and said, "Yeah, just me." Marco's eyes darted back over my shoulder, and I swear he flinched like he was seeing something move. He thrust the pizza box at me, nearly shoved it into my chest. "Here," he said, voice cracking, "keep the change." I'd handed him a 20 for a $16 order. Before I could say anything else, he was backing away. Then he turned and literally ran down the stairs. Not walked quickly, ran. I heard him stumbling down the stairwell in his haste to get away. I stood there in my doorway for a moment, pizza in hand, completely stunned. Then I slowly turned and looked back into my apartment. Everything looked normal. TV on, lights on, nothing out of place. But knowing what Marco had seen, or at least that he'd definitely seen something, made my heart race. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it for a minute, trying to calm down. Then I walked to the middle of my living room, set the pizza on the coffee table, and said out loud, "Really, guys, don't do that. You scared the hell out of him." The TV flickered once, like an acknowledgement. That night, the activity was more intense than usual. The ghost cat jumped on my bed twice. The humming was louder. My bathroom door closed by itself while I was brushing my teeth. It was like they were excited or energized by being seen by someone else. I never saw Marco again. When I ordered pizza the next time, it was a different delivery person. When I asked about him, they said he'd quit without notice, just didn't show up for his next shift. It's been years since I moved out of that apartment, but I still think about what happened. What did Marco see that night? Was it the man from my photo? The ghost cat? Something worse I never saw myself? I'll never know. But whatever it was real enough to make a grown man run in terror and quit his job. The strangest part of all of it is how I got used to living with them. By the end of my lease, I was comfortable with my ghostly roommates. They had their quirks and boundaries, and so did I. We had an understanding. Sometimes I even missed them, especially missed the ghost cat. I've lived in 3 places since then, all normal, all quiet, no humming, no giggling, no objects moving on their own. But every now and then, when I'm home alone at night, I get the feeling I'm being watched. And sometimes, just sometimes, I think I catch a glimpse of a gray and white cat darting around a corner. Story 13. I've never told anyone outside my family about what happened when I was in kindergarten. It's been over 20 years, but I still get goosebumps thinking about it. We only lived in that house for about 8 months, but that was more than enough. My parents moved us to this small town, one of the oldest settlements in our province, because my dad got a job at the local factory. The house we rented was this big Victorian thing on Maplewood Drive. It had these weird angles and creaky floors, but my parents thought it was charming. I remember my mom saying how lucky we were to find such a character home within our budget. Now I understand why it was so affordable. The first weird thing happened around Christmas. I was 5 years old and obsessed with this cartoon show that came on after lunch. One afternoon, I was sitting cross-legged on the living room carpet about 3 feet from the TV. This was the 90s, no streaming or anything, so you had to catch your shows when they aired. I was in the middle of my favorite episode when suddenly the TV switched to the news channel. I figured I'd accidentally sat on the remote, but when I looked down, it was sitting untouched on the coffee table, well out of my reach. I pressed the button to change it back, and for a few minutes everything was normal. Then it happened again. The channel flipped to the news, some boring adult talking about weather or something. I remember feeling frustrated because I was missing my show. I changed it back again, and this time I deliberately placed the remote on the far side of the coffee table. Not even a minute later, the TV changed channels again. I called for my mum, who was in the kitchen. "Mom, the TV keeps changing by itself." She came in wiping her hands on a dishcloth, looking annoyed like I was messing around. "Lily, just use the remote properly." Before she could finish, we both watched as the TV started flipping through channels rapidly. It wasn't just changing once or twice, it was cycling through every channel faster and faster. The volume stayed the same, but the images were blurring together. At the same time, this touch lamp we had on the end table started turning on and off, not flickering like bad wiring, but fully on, then fully off, in perfect rhythm with the changing channels. My mom froze. I can still picture her face, her eyes wide, the dishcloth clenched in her fist. She wasn't annoyed anymore. She was scared. I don't know what came over me, but I stood up and yelled, "Stop it! I want my show back!" Like I was scolding a naughty classmate. Everything stopped. The TV settled back on my cartoon. The lamp stayed off. The room felt suddenly normal, except for my mom still standing there looking like she'd seen a ghost. She tried to play it off, mumbling something about electrical problems, but I caught her watching the TV nervously for the rest of the afternoon. She called my dad at work, and I overheard her whispering about what happened. Nothing like that occurred again for a few weeks. Then my parents decided to move my bedroom upstairs. They said it was because the upstairs was warmer, but looking back, I think they wanted me away from whatever was happening in the living room. My new bedroom had these gauzy white curtains on the windows. They were super light and would move with the slightest breeze. One night in January, I woke up for no reason. The house was completely silent. It was probably around 2 in the morning, that weird hour when even the house seems to be holding its breath. I wasn't scared at first, just awake. Then I felt cold air brushing against my face. I thought maybe a window was open, but they were all closed. The cold seemed to be coming from under my bed. I was staring at the curtains when they suddenly flew upward, not gently like from a breeze, but violently, like someone had turned on a massive fan underneath them. They shot straight up toward the ceiling, then floated back down slowly. As they fell, they draped over something, or someone, standing beside my bed. Through the thin fabric, I could make out the shape of a woman. She wasn't doing anything, just standing there, the curtain outlining her figure like a ghost in a Halloween costume. I remember feeling paralyzed for a few seconds. Then I sat up and reached out. I don't know why I did that, and pulled the curtain away. There was nothing there. The room was empty, but the cold remained. I sat there with my heart pounding until morning, too terrified to call for my parents or even move. At breakfast, I told my mom what happened. She looked worried but tried to convince me it was just a nightmare. I knew it wasn't. That night, she let me sleep in their room, and the next day my dad checked my room for drafts. They moved my bed to a different wall, saying it would be cozier there. The final thing that happened was the weirdest, and honestly, it still makes my skin crawl. It was early spring, and I was playing in this muddy area behind our house with some neighborhood kids. We found what looked like a cow bone, probably from the farm that used to be there before the neighborhood was built. I thought it was the coolest thing ever and brought it to this little fort we'd made out of sticks and old boards. We propped it up like a trophy and went home when our parents called us for dinner. The next day we went back to the fort, and when we got close, something seemed off. The bone was still there, but it looked different. As we got closer, I realized the bone was moving. It was covered in daddy long-legged spiders. Not just a few, thousands of them. They were pouring out from inside the bone, spreading outward like the bone was birthing them. The other kids screamed and ran. I was frozen, watching this horror show unfold. Eventually, I ran too, but the image stayed with me. A few weeks later, my aunt came to visit. She slept in the spare room, and for some reason, my parents let me make a special sleepover bed on my bedroom floor with blankets and pillows instead of sleeping in my actual bed. I fell asleep quickly that night, but woke up to the feeling of something tickling my leg. At first, I thought it was just the blanket, but the tickling sensation moved up my body. It felt like multiple tiny things crawling on me. I tried to ignore it, but finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I lifted the blanket and nearly screamed. Daddy long legs were all over me, not just one or two, but dozens, silently crawling across my pajamas and bare arms. I jumped up, brushing them off frantically, crying out for my aunt who was sleeping across the room. When she turned on the light, we could see them scattering across the floor. But here's the truly bizarre part. They didn't run in random directions like spiders normally do when exposed to light. They moved as a group, flowing across the floor toward me, following me as I backed away. My aunt wasn't the type to scare easily, but even she looked freaked out. She grabbed me and we ran downstairs, waking my parents. My mom came up with us, armed with a broom, but by the time we got back to my room, the spiders were gone. Not hiding, completely gone, like they'd never been there. My mom looked under the bed, in the closet, everywhere, but couldn't find a single one. She tried to convince herself and me that I'd had a nightmare, but my aunt backed me up. She'd seen them too. The weirdest part, my mom admitted that the same thing had happened to her the week before in the laundry room. Daddy long legs appearing out of nowhere, moving in unnatural ways, then vanishing without a trace. We moved out of that house 3 weeks later. My parents claimed it was because Dad got a better job offer in another town, but I overheard them talking late one night. Mom was saying she couldn't stay another night in that place, and Dad was agreeing with her. I've tried researching the history of that house on Maplewood Drive, but records for that town are spotty. All I know is that sometimes I still wake up feeling that cold breeze on my face, and for a split second, I'm terrified to open my eyes, afraid of what might be standing beside my bed, hidden behind a gauzy white curtain. I still can't look at Daddy long legs without feeling sick. And sometimes, when I'm alone watching TV, I keep the remote clutched tightly in my hand, just in case. Story 14. I still remember that morning like it was yesterday, even though it happened years ago. I was half asleep, shuffling down the hallway of our family home in Madrid after just waking up. The house was completely silent, my parents were still sleeping, and I was heading to the kitchen to get some water. As I passed by the dining room, something caught my eye. There was a bowl of garlic cloves sitting on the sideboard against the wall, like always. Nothing unusual there. But then something happened that I still can't explain to this day. Right as I walked past, one of the garlic cloves literally launched itself out of the bowl and hit the opposite wall with a small thud. I'm not talking about it rolling off or falling. This thing shot across the room like someone had thrown it. I froze. I wasn't even fully awake yet, and for a second I thought I was dreaming. I walked over to where the garlic clove had landed on the floor and picked it up. It was just a normal garlic clove. I checked the bowl. It was pushed back against the wall like always, stable and unmoved. I looked for any explanation, maybe a draft, but all the windows were closed. The house was completely shut up. Maybe vibrations from a passing truck, but our street is quiet and the house is solid stone. Vibrations don't really travel through it. I stood there holding that garlic clove for what felt like forever, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. That was the first time I admitted to myself that something wasn't right about our house. Our home has been in the Martinez family for generations. It's a beautiful old place in Madrid with those thick stone walls and wooden beams that have seen centuries come and go. My grandmother used to say the house had a personality of its own. I always thought she was being poetic until I started experiencing things myself. After the garlic incident, I began noticing other strange occurrences. It was like once I acknowledged something was happening, the house decided to stop hiding. One thing that became apparent was how often visitors would get sick when staying with us. My cousin Lucia came to stay for a weekend and developed a migraine so severe she had to go home early. My mother's friend Carmen complained of feeling dizzy and nauseous the entire time she was here. My father's colleague spent one night and woke up with inexplicable bruises on his arms. At first we blamed it on allergies, the change in environment, or just coincidence, but it happened too often to ignore. Then my grandmother passed away. She'd lived in this house her entire life, and losing her was devastating. The night after her funeral, I couldn't sleep. Around 3 in the morning, I went downstairs to make some tea, hoping it would help me relax. As I entered the kitchen, I saw someone sitting at the table. It was a man dressed in clothing from the late 1800s, a formal suit with a waistcoat and a top hat placed on the table beside him. He was staring straight ahead, not moving, his hands folded in front of him. I could see through him slightly, like he was made of smoke or fog, but his features were distinct enough that I could make out his face. I stood there completely paralyzed with fear, unable to scream or run. After what felt like an eternity, he slowly turned his head toward me. His eyes met mine, and then he simply faded away, becoming more and more transparent until there was nothing left. I ran back upstairs and didn't leave my room until morning. When I finally got the courage to tell my mother what I'd seen, she pulled out an old photo album. There he was, the exact same man I'd seen in our kitchen. It was my grandmother's grandfather, Antonio Martinez. He died in this house in 1897. The most disturbing part was what my mother told me next. In the week before my grandmother died, she kept telling us that someone was calling her name. She said she would hear knocking at her bedroom door, but when she opened it, no one was there. At the time, we attributed it to her age and declining health. Now I wonder if Antonio had been coming to prepare her for what was coming, or maybe even to guide her after death. Last month, something happened that chilled me to the bone. My mother installed a security camera in the hallway downstairs after we thought we heard someone trying to get in the back door one night. One morning, she called me over to look at the footage from around 3 a.m. There, standing in our hallway, was a woman in old-fashioned white clothing, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She was staring directly at the camera, completely still, for almost 5 minutes before the footage went fuzzy and she disappeared. What makes this even more terrifying is that her clothing style matched the era of Antonio, the male ghost I'd seen. Could she be his wife, a servant from the house? We don't know, but the fact that the camera caught her means it wasn't just in my head. Something real is happening here. There have been countless other incidents. Last winter I was home alone studying for exams. Everyone else had gone to visit relatives for the weekend, but I needed to stay behind to prepare for a test. Around midnight, I heard someone trying to force open the laundry gate at the back of the house. The metal rattled violently, like someone was shaking it with all their strength. Then I heard loud banging on the door itself. I called the police, convinced someone was trying to break in. They arrived within minutes and searched the entire property. Nothing. No footprints in the soft ground outside the door, no signs of tampering with the lock, and the security camera showed no one approaching the house. The officers looked at me like I was crazy or playing a prank. One Sunday around 5 in the morning, my mother was up early making coffee. She heard scratching at our front door, not knocking but a distinct scraping sound like fingernails dragging across wood. Our cat Luna ran to the door and started sniffing along the bottom edge. Then the strangest thing happened. Luna's fur stood on end and she bolted upstairs like something had terrified her. Luna is not easily scared. She's the kind of cat that stands her ground against neighborhood dogs twice her size. Later that same week, I was downstairs reading when I heard that same scratching sound coming from my bedroom upstairs. I knew I was alone in the house. Whatever had been at our front door was now inside in my personal space. I didn't have the courage to go up and check. I waited in the living room until my parents came home. What makes all of this harder to deal with is the unpredictability. We might go weeks without anything happening, lulling ourselves into a false sense of security, thinking maybe it's over. Then something so undeniable occurs that we're forced to acknowledge that whatever shares our home is still here. Last Tuesday was the worst day so far. I was home alone again. My parents had gone to a dinner party and weren't expected back until late. Around 8 in the evening, I was in the kitchen making dinner when all the cabinet doors opened simultaneously. Not just one or two, but every single cabinet and drawer in the kitchen flung open at once. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet house. I stood there, knife in hand, frozen in place. Then the faucet turned on by itself, full blast. Water splashed into the sink as I backed away toward the door. The lights began to flicker, and I felt the temperature in the room drop dramatically. I could see my breath clouding in front of my face. Then came the smell, this awful, sickly, sweet odor like rotting flowers and wet soil. It was so strong I started gagging. I turned to run out of the kitchen and saw her, the woman from the security footage, standing in the doorway. Up close, I could see details the camera hadn't captured. Her face was gaunt with deep-set eyes that seemed to hold no light. Her white dress was actually a nightgown, and there were dark stains at the hem that looked disturbingly like dried blood. She didn't move or speak. She just stared at me with those empty eyes. Behind me, dishes began to rattle in the cabinets. A glass flew off the counter and shattered against the wall. That broke my paralysis, and I ran straight toward the doorway where she stood. I expected to crash into her or pass through her, but as I approached, she simply vanished. I didn't stop running until I was outside on the street. I called my parents, hysterical, begging them to come home. By the time they arrived 20 minutes later, everything in the house was back to normal. The cabinets were closed, the faucet was off, and there was no sign of the broken glass. Even the smell was gone. If it weren't for my obvious terror, they might have thought I was making it all up. We still live in this house. It's been in our family for generations. And despite everything, my parents refuse to leave. They say every old house has its quirks and stories. But these aren't just stories to me. I've seen them, heard them, smelled them. Last night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to find all my belongings arranged in a perfect circle on my bedroom floor. Books, jewelry, clothes, everything that had been in my drawers and on my shelves. In the center was that same garlic clove from years ago, the one that had launched itself across the room. I recognized the slight discoloration on one side. I have no idea how it could be the same one. We would have used it or thrown it away years ago. But somehow, I know it is. I don't know what these spirits want from us or why they're still here. All I know is that the Martinez family home is not just ours. We share it with the dead, and they are becoming increasingly determined to make sure we know they're here. Story 15. I've never really shared this with anyone outside my closest friends and family. Even now, typing this out makes my hands shake a little. It happened in 2019 when I was 18, living with my parents in Ravencrest. I've always been the logical type, not someone who jumps at shadows or believes in ghost stories. That changed after one Friday night that I still can't fully explain. That evening had been completely normal. My family and I went bowling, something we did pretty regularly. I remember I did pretty well that night, beat my dad for the first time in months, which had put me in a good mood. We got home around 6, had dinner together, and then everyone kind of split off to do their own thing. My parents were watching some crime show downstairs. My younger brother was at a friend's house for a sleepover, and I went up to my room to watch movies on my laptop. My bedroom was on the second floor of our house, with a window that faced the backyard. It wasn't particularly big, but it was mine. Walls painted light blue, fairy lights strung up around my bookshelf, photos of friends tacked to a corkboard. I had a queen-sized bed against one wall, my desk by the window, and a small TV on my dresser across from the bed. There was a lamp on my nightstand that cast this sort of warm glow around the room when it was on. I remember I was watching some romantic comedy, can't even remember which one now, and I was completely relaxed. It must have been around 7 or 8 in the evening. The sun had already set, and it was that deep kind of darkness that settles in during winter. I was wrapped in my favorite blanket, half paying attention to the movie, half scrolling through my phone. That's when I saw it. just a flicker of movement in my peripheral vision, outside my window. When you live somewhere your whole life, you develop a sense for what belongs and what doesn't. This didn't belong. I turned my head toward the window, and for just a split second, I could have sworn I saw a face staring in at me, not clearly, just the impression of a pale oval pressed against the glass. Then it was gone, vanishing into the darkness beyond. I froze. My room was on the second floor. There's no way anyone could look in without a ladder or standing on something tall. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a reflection, or my mind playing tricks on me. I got up and went to the window, pulling the curtains closed tight. I even checked that they were fully drawn, with no gaps someone could peek through. I tried to laugh it off, told myself I was being silly, getting spooked by nothing. I texted my friend Dante about it, and he called me right away, saying I was watching too many horror movies. We chatted for about 20 minutes, him trying to distract me with gossip about people from school. While we were talking, I was sitting cross-legged on my bed, back against the headboard. The movie was still playing on my laptop, but I'd turned the volume down. That's when I heard it, a whisper, right by my ear, as clear as if someone was sitting next to me. "Go to bed." The voice was feminine, but wrong somehow, like it was being filtered through static. I jumped so hard I almost threw my phone across the room. What? What happened?" Dante asked, hearing my gasp. I thought I heard something," I said, not wanting to sound crazy. Probably just my parents downstairs. But I knew it wasn't them. The voice had been right next to me, not muffled through the floor or door. "Maybe I should try to sleep," I told Dante. "I'm freaking myself out for no reason." After we hung up, I sat there for a moment, listening. The house was quiet except for the faint sound of the TV downstairs. I felt ridiculous, but also I wanted to follow the instruction. Like there was this weird compulsion to lie down and go to sleep. So I did. I closed my laptop, put it on my nightstand, and lay down under my covers. As soon as my head hit the pillow, this overwhelming sense of dread washed over me. It wasn't like normal anxiety. It was physical, like someone had placed a cold, heavy stone on my chest. The air felt thick, almost difficult to breathe, and that's when I noticed the mist. Near my bedroom door, there was this dark, swirling mass, not quite smoke, not quite shadow. It was subtle at first, like when you stare at a spot too long and your vision starts playing tricks on you. But as I watched, it seemed to grow more solid, more defined. I wanted to call out for my parents, but my voice wouldn't work. It was like my body wasn't my own anymore. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, could barely even blink. All I could do was lie there, my eyes darting around the room. My lamp was still on, casting a warm glow that somehow made everything worse, because in its reflection on my closet mirror, I could see her. A woman, standing beside my bed. She hadn't been there a second ago, I was sure of it. She was wearing a beige dress that hung off her thin frame like it was too big for her. Her skin was so pale it almost glowed in the dim light, and her hair was long and black, hanging in tangled strands around her face. But her hands, God, her fingers were unnaturally long, ending in twisted, yellowed nails that curved like claws, and she was looking right at me, not at my reflection in the mirror, at me. Her eyes were fixed on me lying in the bed, even though she was only visible to me in the mirror. When I realized this, my blood turned to ice. She wasn't a reflection. She was really there, standing beside me, but somehow only appearing in the mirror. Slowly, so slowly, she began to move. Not walking, but gliding around the foot of my bed. Her movements were fluid but wrong, like watching something underwater. Her head remained perfectly still as her body moved, those eyes never leaving mine. I tried to move, to jump up, to run, to do anything, but I couldn't. It wasn't sleep paralysis, I was wide awake. It was like invisible hands were pinning me down, keeping me from escaping. The bed creaked. In the mirror's reflection, I could see her now at the edge of my bed, just inches away from me. Her face was expressionless, but those eyes, they weren't empty. There was something in them, hunger, curiosity, I don't know, but they were fixed on me with an intensity that made me feel like she was seeing straight through to my soul. Then I felt it, her fingertips on my arm. They dragged slowly across my skin, leaving trails of burning sensation like acid. It wasn't painful exactly. It was cold, so cold it burned. I could see the marks appearing on my skin as she touched me. Thin red lines that faded almost as quickly as they appeared. I remember thinking with absolute clarity, I am going to die. This thing, whatever it is going to kill me, and there's nothing I can do about it. The woman's mouth began to open, wider than a human mouth should be able to open, and I saw rows of needle-like teeth. A sound started to build in the room, a low humming that made my teeth vibrate. Her face was getting closer to mine, those terrible teeth just inches from my face, when suddenly my bedroom door opened. "Amelia, you still awake?" It was my mom poking her head in. The presence vanished instantly. One moment the woman was there, her face nearly touching mine, and the next she was gone. The pressure on my chest lifted, and I could move again. I sat up so fast I made myself dizzy. "Honey, are you okay? You look pale as a sheet." My mom came into the room, concern written all over her face. I couldn't speak at first. When I finally found my voice, it came out as a croak. "Did you see her?" "See who?" My mom looked around the empty room, then back at me with worry. "Amelia, there's no one here but us." But she was just... I stopped myself, realizing how crazy I sounded. I think I had a nightmare. My mom sat on the edge of my bed, putting her hand on my forehead like checking for a fever. "Your eyes are so wide, must have been some nightmare." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without breaking down. I let her think it was just a bad dream, that I'd fallen asleep watching my movie. It was easier than trying to explain what I'd seen, what I'd felt. She stayed with me for a while, and eventually I calmed down enough to convince her I was okay. After she left, I turned on every light in my room and sat up until dawn, afraid to close my eyes. The next morning, I examined my arm where I'd felt those fingers touch me. There were no marks, no evidence that anything had happened. I checked the window. No signs that anyone had been outside. Everything was normal. I never saw the woman in beige again. Sometimes I catch glimpses of movement in mirrors or windows, but nothing concrete, nothing like that night. But I remember every detail with perfect clarity. The sound of her breathing, the texture of her skin, the coldness of her touch. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't sleep paralysis. I was awake the entire time. I've researched similar experiences since then. Some people say it was a hypnagogic hallucination, my brain misfiring between wakefulness and sleep. Others suggest more supernatural explanations that I'm not sure I believe. All I know is what I experienced felt real. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night with that same feeling of being watched. I've moved out of my parents' house since then into a small apartment with no mirrors in the bedroom. I don't watch movies alone anymore, and I always sleep with the lights on. I don't know what that thing was that visited me that night. I don't know what would have happened if my mom hadn't walked in when she did. And honestly, I don't want to know. Some questions are better left unanswered. But sometimes, when I'm drifting off to sleep, I swear I can still hear that whisper right next to my ear, "Go to bed." And every time, I do exactly the opposite. Story 16. I still get nightmares about what happened in Minnesota 3 years ago. I've tried telling a few people, but they either think I'm making it up or that I was just seeing things. I know what I saw, though. I know what was outside my window that night, and I know it wasn't just some normal animal. Back in 2019, I was living with my mom and brother in this small apartment complex in rural Minnesota. We were on the second floor, and my bedroom window faced these massive cornfields that stretched out forever. I'd always loved that view, during the day at least. At night, those fields became this vast darkness that seemed to swallow everything. I've always been a night owl, That particular night in October, I couldn't sleep and was up around midnight playing my keyboard with headphones on. I had this little setup by my window where I could play and look out at the stars when the sky was clear. I remember it was chilly, so I had the window closed but the blinds were open. I was in the middle of practicing this piece I'd been working on for weeks when something caught my eye. At first I thought it was just the wind moving the corn, but when I focused, I realized it was a goat, just a black goat, poking its head out from between the stalks across the street. Honestly, I didn't think much of it at first. Our town was surrounded by farms, and animals escaped sometimes. I figured someone's goat had gotten loose and would find its way home or get collected in the morning. I watched it for a minute as it fully emerged from the corn and walked to the middle of the road. That's when I got my first weird feeling. The goat just stopped in the middle of the street and stood there. It was facing directly toward our building, toward my window specifically. I couldn't see its eyes clearly from that distance, but I could tell it was staring up at me. I remember getting goosebumps, but I told myself I was being stupid. It's just a goat. Animals stare at random things all the time. I went back to playing for about an hour, trying to ignore the nagging feeling that something was off. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me, and I looked out the window again. The goat had moved. It wasn't in the street anymore. It was on our apartment complex lawn, and it was still facing my window. Under the yellowish glow of the apartment complex sign, I could see it much more clearly now. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. It didn't have hooves. Where hooves should have been, this thing had hands, human-like hands with long, skinny fingers that looked twisted and broken, like the bones had been snapped and healed wrong. The fingers were unnaturally elongated and seemed to bend at odd angles. They were pressed against the grass in a way that made me feel sick to my stomach. I immediately pulled back from the window, my heart racing. I'd just watched this horror movie the previous weekend with my brother, some B-grade thing about demonic creatures, and I told myself I was just letting my imagination run wild. But when I forced myself to look again, the goat was still there, still staring, still with those wrong hands. I couldn't stay in my room after that. I grabbed my blanket and went to sleep on the couch in our living room, telling myself I'd feel stupid in the morning when the goat was gone and I realized I'd just been tired and seeing things. When I woke up, my mom asked why I was on the couch. I made up some excuse about falling asleep watching TV. I couldn't bring myself to tell her what I'd seen. She already thought I was too imaginative and would have just dismissed it anyway. But I had to check my window. I had to prove to myself it was nothing. My bedroom looked normal in the daylight. Everything was exactly where I'd left it. But then I noticed something on the outside of my window. There was a greasy handprint there. Not a normal human handprint, but one with long, skinny, twisted fingers, exactly like what I'd seen on the goat. Stuck in the grease were small black hairs. I stood there frozen, trying to process what I was seeing. My window was on the second floor. There was no way a normal person could have reached it without a ladder, and there would have been no reason for anyone to do that anyway. I couldn't rationalize this away. I took pictures of it with my phone, though they didn't capture the details very well. The grease made it look like just a smudge in the photos. When I showed my mom, she thought it was probably just some bird that had flown into the window and left oil from its feathers. She didn't see the handprint shape or the hairs, or maybe she didn't want to see them. I spent that day in a daze, jumping at every sound. I kept checking out the window, scanning the cornfields for any sign of the goat thing, but there was nothing. That night, I convinced my brother to switch rooms with me, making up some story about wanting a change. He thought I was being weird, but agreed. I couldn't sleep in that room anymore. Every time I looked at that window, I imagined those hands climbing up the side of our building, those broken fingers pressing against the glass while I slept. Within a month, I'd convinced my mom we needed to move. I made up excuses. The apartment was too small, the location wasn't convenient, whatever I could think of. Eventually she gave in, probably just to stop my constant complaining. We moved to a different town about 30 miles away, and I tried to forget what happened. For a while, it worked. I graduated high school, started community college, and eventually moved in with my boyfriend Kyle in 2021. I thought I'd put it all behind me. Then the dreams started. The first one happened after we went camping at a state park. In the dream, I was sitting by our campfire, and when I looked up, I could see it standing just beyond the tree line, the black goat with the twisted human hands. It was watching me, and somehow I knew it had followed me all this time. I woke up sweating and shaking. I tried to tell myself it was just a dream, just my subconscious dredging up an old fear. But then it started appearing in other dreams, mundane ones where I was shopping or driving. The goat would just be there in the background watching me with those eyes that I could now see clearly. They weren't goat eyes at all, but human-like eyes with rectangular pupils. The worst dreams involved dead animals. I'd be walking and suddenly come across a deer carcass or a pile of dead birds, and the goat would be standing over them, those mangled hands covered in blood. I'd try to run, but in that dream way, I could never move fast enough. Kyle started noticing that something was wrong. I wasn't sleeping well, and when I did sleep, I'd often wake up crying or gasping for air. I finally told him about what happened in Minnesota and about the dreams. He was supportive but skeptical. He suggested I talk to someone professional about it, thinking it might be some kind of anxiety manifesting in my dreams. The worst nightmare came just 2 weeks ago. In the dream, I was in what felt like Salem, Massachusetts, though I've never actually been there. I was wearing these old-fashioned Puritan clothes, walking away from some dark woods. I could feel it watching me from the tree line. When I looked back, I saw it standing upright on its hind legs, those twisted human hands hanging at its sides. It was taller than any man I'd ever seen, with its goat head tilted at an unnatural angle, and it was smiling at me. A goat shouldn't be able to smile, but this one was, revealing rows of sharp human-like teeth. I tried to run, but my feet sank into the mud. The thing started walking toward me, still on 2 legs, moving in a jerky, unnatural way. As it got closer, I could smell it, a sour, rotten smell mixed with something chemical. It reached out one of those broken-fingered hands toward my face. Kyle had to wake me up because I was thrashing around and making these horrible whimpering sounds. He said I was twitching so violently that he thought I was having a seizure. When I came to, I was drenched in sweat, and my muscles were sore like I'd been tensed for hours. The dreams have continued, getting more intense and more frequent. Last night, I dreamed I was back in that Minnesota apartment, looking out my old bedroom window. The goat was right there, its face pressed against the glass, those hands splayed out next to its head. It opened its mouth and spoke my name. Not with a human voice, but with this wet, gurgling sound that somehow formed the syllables of my name. I don't know what to do anymore. I've tried sleeping pills, meditation, keeping lights on. Nothing helps. Sometimes I think I see movement in the corners of my yard, or catch glimpses of something dark watching me from between buildings when I'm driving home late. I'm afraid to look directly, afraid of what I might see. Part of me wonders if whatever that thing was in Minnesota somehow attached itself to me. Another part wonders if I'm just losing my mind. All I know is that 3 years later I still can't explain what I saw that night or why it seems to be haunting me now. I haven't told Kyle, but I'm pretty sure I saw small black hairs on our bedroom windowsill this morning. I'm afraid to check for handprints. Story 17. I've held on to this experience for over 3 years now, constantly questioning what I saw that night. I'm still trying to make sense of it, but I can't. I need to share it with people who might understand or have experienced something similar. This happened in April 2020 during the first wave of COVID lockdowns. I'd been feeling unwell for days. Headache, fever, that horrible fatigue where even lifting your arm feels impossible. Back then, testing wasn't readily available in our area, but my doctor said my symptoms matched COVID-19 and told me to isolate immediately. Our house in Cedarbrook isn't huge, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and I live with my husband Tom and our teenage daughter Mia. Since we only have 1 master bedroom, I decided to quarantine in our spare bedroom that doubles as my home office. It has an attached bathroom, which made isolation possible without sharing facilities. By day 5 of quarantine, I was in rough shape. My fever had been hovering around 102 degrees for 3 days straight. I could barely eat. Everything tasted like cardboard, and my sense of smell had completely disappeared. Tom would leave trays of food outside my door, knock, and walk away. I'd wait until I heard him go downstairs before opening the door to retrieve it. We'd text each other from different parts of the house. It was lonely and depressing. That day, I think it was a Tuesday, had been particularly difficult. My fever spiked to 103.8 in the afternoon. I was alternating between freezing cold and burning up, soaking through my pajamas with sweat. The body aches were excruciating. My doctor had advised against going to the hospital unless my breathing became compromised, and thankfully, while I had a nasty cough, I could still breathe okay. Tom had left me some soup and crackers around 6 p.m., but I could only manage a few spoonfuls. I remember taking Tylenol around 8 and falling into a fitful sleep shortly after. The bedroom was pitch black. I had blackout curtains installed because I sometimes worked night shifts at the hospital as a nurse. I woke up suddenly around 3 a.m. You know that feeling when you're jolted awake and instantly alert? That's how it was. The room was completely dark except for the dim glow of my phone charger light. I lay there for a moment, trying to figure out what had awakened me. My heart was pounding, and I had this overwhelming sensation that something was wrong. Then I realized I wasn't alone in the room. Standing at the foot of my bed, maybe 4 feet away, was a figure. It was tall, probably around 6 feet, and impossibly thin. At first, I thought someone had broken in, and terror paralyzed me. But as my eyes adjusted slightly to the darkness, I could make out more details, and what I saw made no sense. It appeared to be a woman with long, dark hair that seemed to move slightly, though there was no breeze in the room. She was draped in what looked like black clothing, but the edges of her form weren't solid. They seemed to undulate, waver, like heat rising from pavement in summer, or like fumes or vapor, as if she wasn't fully materialized in our world. I couldn't see her face clearly. It was too dark, but I had the distinct impression she was looking directly at me. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I just lay there, my fever-addled brain trying to process what I was seeing. Suddenly, the motion-activated nightlight in my attached bathroom flicked on. I have one of those little plug-in lights that activates when it detects movement, and the soft glow spilled into the bedroom from the open bathroom door. I instinctively glanced toward the light, just for a split second. When I looked back to where the figure had been standing, it was gone. In its place, I could now see the outline of my jacket hanging on a hook on the back of my bedroom door. With the bathroom light providing some illumination, I could clearly tell that the jacket was at least 2 feet further away than where the figure had been standing. Whatever I'd seen had been much closer, right at the edge of my bed. I sat up, my heart hammering against my ribs. I was shaking uncontrollably, partly from fear and partly from my fever. I stared at the jacket, trying to convince myself that's all I had seen, but I knew better. The figure had been closer, taller, and most importantly, it had moved. Those undulating edges couldn't be explained by a stationary piece of clothing. As I sat there trying to make sense of it all, the bathroom light switched off. The motion sensor had timed out, plunging me back into darkness. The sudden absence of light sent me into a panic. I lunged for the bedside lamp, fumbling with the switch until warm light flooded the room. I grabbed the TV remote and turned it on too, not caring what was playing. I just needed noise, light, anything to fill the terrifying emptiness. The room appeared normal. My jacket hung innocently on the door hook. Nothing was out of place, but the temperature had dropped noticeably. My breath was visible in the air, something that had definitely not been happening before, even with my fever chills. I texted Tom, my fingers shaking so badly I could barely type. "Are you awake? Did you come to my room?" His reply came a few minutes later. "No, been asleep. Everything okay?" I didn't want to scare him. Just checking. Go back to sleep. I sat up against the headboard, pulling my blankets tight around me. The TV played some infomercial about kitchen gadgets, but I wasn't watching. I was scanning every corner of the room, jumping at every shadow. I must have looked ridiculous. A 37-year-old woman terrified of the dark, surrounded by glowing screens like a child. But the fear was primal. Whatever I'd seen hadn't felt human. It hadn't felt like anything from this world. I fought to stay awake. I was exhausted from being sick, but the adrenaline kept me alert for a while. I kept the lights and TV on, my phone clutched in my hand. I remember checking the time repeatedly. 3:25, 3:41, 4:12. At some point, exhaustion won. I woke up around 9 the next morning with the TV still on and the lamp still lit. Sunlight streamed through a crack in the curtains, making the room look cheerful and ordinary. In the daylight, it was easy to doubt what I'd seen. Fever can cause hallucinations. I was sick, isolated, probably dehydrated. My brain could have conjured all sorts of things. But then I noticed something on the floor near where the figure had stood, a small puddle of water about the size of my palm. I hadn't had any water by my bed. Tom had left me ginger ale the night before, but the can was still full on the nightstand. The bathroom floor was dry. There was no logical explanation for that water. I recovered from COVID about a week later. My fever broke 2 days after the incident, and gradually my strength returned. I never saw the figure again during my illness, though I slept with lights on for the remainder of my quarantine. I've told very few people about what happened. Tom thinks I hallucinated because of the fever. My best friend suggested sleep paralysis, though I'm certain I could move. My daughter Mia is the only one who didn't immediately dismiss my experience. She said, "Maybe when you're really sick, the barrier between worlds gets thinner." Her words have stayed with me. Was I visited by something from another realm? Was it a ghost, a fever dream? I still don't know. But 3 things I am absolutely certain of. First, what I saw was not my jacket. The figure was closer to my bed, taller, and had those strange, undulating edges that no stationary object could have. Second, something triggered that motion-activated light in my bathroom. I was lying still in bed, and there was nothing else in the room that could have moved. Third, I've never felt such bone-deep terror as I did in those moments, a primal instinctive fear that went beyond rational thought. Sometimes I wonder if the entity was malevolent or just curious. Was it drawn to my weakened state? Was it something that preys on the ill? Or was it simply passing through, checking on me, perhaps even protecting me in some strange way? I still live in the same house, sleep in the same master bedroom, but I've never used that spare room again. We've since converted it fully into a home office, and nobody sleeps there. I've never told Tom this, but sometimes when I walk past that room, I get goosebumps, and the air feels cooler near the doorway. COVID took so much from so many people. For me, it also took my certainty about what's real and what's not. I used to be so rational, so grounded. Now, I'm not so sure about anything anymore. Whatever visited me that night in April 2020 remains unexplained, and I suspect it always will. Story 18. I've never been the type to share personal stuff online, but I need to tell someone about what happened to me last week. I still can't make sense of it, and I'm hoping someone here might have experienced something similar. I live alone in a modest 2-bedroom house in Burlington that I bought 5 years ago. It's nothing special. Built in the 70s, needs a new roof soon, but it's mine. I've always been interested in the paranormal, but more from a protective standpoint. I sage my house regularly, keep protective crystals by the windows, that sort of thing. I've never actually wanted to encounter anything supernatural. I just like being prepared. Last Tuesday started like any other day. I woke up around 6 in the morning, made coffee, and started working from my home office. I'm a graphic designer, and I had a big project due by the end of the week, so I was pretty focused. Around 1 in the afternoon, I decided to take a break and make some lunch. My house has this long hallway that connects the bedrooms to the living areas. At the end of this hallway, you can see into the dining room, and there's this big antique mirror on the far wall that my grandmother left me. It's one of those ornate gold-framed things that shows almost the entire room when you look at it. So I'm walking down the hallway, scrolling through my phone, when something in that mirror catches my eye. At first, I thought my brain was just filling in patterns, like when you think you see a face in wood grain or something. But when I actually focused on the mirror, I froze. Standing in my dining room, or at least reflected in the mirror, was this thing. It looked like a massive white cat, but not like any cat I've ever seen. It was standing upright, maybe 3 feet tall and about 2 feet wide. Its proportions reminded me of those Japanese lucky cat statues, maneki neko, but smoother, less detailed. And its face, God, its face had this wide smile, like the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland, but somehow not threatening. I think I stood there staring at it in the mirror for maybe 3 or 4 seconds before my brain kicked into gear. I spun around to look directly into the dining room, heart pounding, expecting to see this white cat creature standing there, but there was nothing. Well, not exactly nothing. For a split second, I could see what looked like an afterimage. You know that visual effect when you stare at something bright and then look away, like that, but in the shape of this cat thing, and then even that faded. Here's where it gets really weird. I should have been terrified, right? I mean, I just saw some unknown entity in my house. But instead of fear, this wave of peacefulness washed over me. My shoulders relaxed, my breathing slowed, and I felt this incredible lightness throughout my body. It was like stepping into sunlight after being in a dark room, but more intense. Everything around me seemed sharper, more vibrant. Don't get me wrong. For that first moment when I realized something was in my house, I felt that jolt of adrenaline and unease. But it disappeared almost instantly, replaced by this unusual calm. I actually found myself smiling, which makes absolutely no sense given the situation. I remember looking around my dining room trying to find any explanation. The windows were closed, no unusual shadows or light patterns that might explain what I saw. My dining table was clear except for a small plant and some mail, nothing that could be mistaken for a giant cat creature. I walked into the room and stood exactly where I had seen the thing in the mirror. Looking back at the mirror from this position, all I could see was myself, looking confused and slightly dazed. I even checked behind the furniture, half expecting to find, I don't know what, a white cat statue someone had snuck into my house as a prank, but there was nothing. The weirdest part was how present I felt in that moment. I've read about mindfulness and being in the now, but I've never experienced it like this. Colors seemed more vivid, sounds more distinct. I could hear the refrigerator humming from the kitchen, birds outside, even the subtle creaking of the house, all sounds I normally tune out. I sat down at my dining table, still experiencing this unusual sense of peace. I should mention that I've struggled with anxiety for years. I take medication for it, and I'm used to that constant background hum of worry. But in that moment, it was completely gone. My mind was quiet, and I felt okay, more than okay. I felt good. I tried to rationalize what had happened. Maybe I was tired. I had been working since early morning without much of a break. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me, but I've been tired plenty of times before and never hallucinated a giant smiling cat. If this had been caused by paranoia or fear, I would have expected my heart to be racing, maybe some sleep deprivation, a sense of dread, but I felt none of that, just this unusual clarity and calm. I took out my phone and snapped some pictures of the dining room and the mirror, but of course nothing unusual showed up. I even recorded a short video walking the same path down the hallway, hoping to catch something. Nothing. I went back to work after about 30 minutes, and though that sense of heightened awareness gradually faded, the unusual calm stayed with me for the rest of the day. I slept better that night than I had in months. The next morning, I woke up wondering if I had dreamed the whole thing. but it felt too real, too vivid to be just a dream. I walked down that hallway with a bit of anticipation, half hoping to see the cat thing again. But the mirror just showed my ordinary dining room. I've been researching since then, trying to find any accounts of similar experiences. Most cryptid encounters I've read about involve fear, dread, or at least unease. Mothman sightings, for example, are often associated with disaster and foreboding. Angel encounters usually come with that "fear not" warning for a reason. They're apparently terrifying to behold. But this was different. What gets me is how benevolent this encounter felt. I wasn't scared. I was comforted. The creature wasn't threatening. It was almost friendly. That smile wasn't menacing. It was welcoming. And it appeared to be standing on something like a pedestal or a rock of similar size to itself. That detail has stuck with me, though I can't explain why it matters. I've always been the type to ward off supernatural entities, not attract them. I have protective symbols around my house, sage bundles in drawers. I never wanted to encounter anything paranormal, and yet, when I did, it wasn't frightening at all. I've been going back and forth on whether to tell anyone about this. My friends would either think I'm making it up or suggest I see a doctor. But I know what I saw, and more importantly, I know what I felt. There was something in my house that day, something that doesn't fit into any category of cryptid or supernatural entity I'm familiar with. Since then, I've been walking down that hallway more slowly, paying attention to the mirror. Sometimes I sit in the dining room, just waiting. I've even tried calling out to it, feeling slightly ridiculous as I do so. Nothing has happened again, but I find myself hoping it will. I've been thinking about what it could have been. A spirit guide, some kind of house guardian, a cryptid that's managed to stay under the radar because it doesn't terrorize people. I don't know. I'm writing this partly because I want to know if anyone else has experienced something similar, a benevolent entity sighting, particularly one that looks like what I described. Has anyone else encountered a friendly cryptid in their home? Something that left them feeling better after seeing it, rather than worse? It's been over a week now, and that dining room mirror shows nothing unusual. But I keep looking. Every time I walk down that hallway, I glance at the reflection, hoping to catch another glimpse of the white cat thing with its Cheshire smile. Part of me thinks I should be afraid of wanting to see it again, but I'm not. Whatever it was, it didn't mean me harm. I've started leaving small offerings on the dining table, a saucer of milk one day, a small dish of honey the next. I feel silly doing it, but also compelled somehow. Nothing has been consumed, but I keep doing it anyway. Last night, I sat in the dining room for hours, staring at that mirror, willing the cat thing to appear again. It didn't, but as I finally got up to go to bed, I caught a flash of white in my peripheral vision, gone when I turned to look directly at it, and that same feeling washed over me again, just for a moment. That peace, that clarity. I don't know what's happening, or what I saw that day. I don't know if I'll ever see it again. But I wanted to share this because it's challenged everything I thought I knew about supernatural encounters. Not all of them are frightening. Not all entities mean us harm. Sometimes maybe they just want to smile at us. Story 19. I still can't sleep with the lights off. It's been almost 30 years since we left that house in upstate New York, but some nights I still wake up in a cold sweat, convinced there's something watching me from the corner of the room. My wife Maria thinks therapy might help, but how do you explain to a therapist that you're afraid of something you can't even prove existed? I've never written this down before. Maybe getting it out will help. It was the early 90s when we moved into that colonial-style house just outside Albany. I was 24. Maria was 22. We had our 5-year-old daughter Lily and our toddler son Michael. We were so excited about the house. 3 bedrooms, a finished basement, big yard, all for a price we could actually afford on my music store salary. The previous owners had been eager to sell, which should have been our first clue. The first few weeks were normal. We painted walls, unpacked boxes, and started settling in. I was working at this little record shop downtown called Soundgarden. It wasn't much, but I loved being around music all day, helping people find albums, ordering stock. We had our regulars, mostly college kids and music nerds. And then there was this old man. He'd come in maybe once a week, always wearing these strange necklaces made of what looked like animal bones, small ones, bird bones, rabbit feet, that kind of thing. He never bought anything, just browsed for hours, occasionally asking weird questions about obscure bands. The other employees avoided him, but I found him fascinating in a way. He told me once he'd been a professor of anthropology before retiring. One afternoon in October, he was thumbing through our folk section and I joked, "What, no human skulls on that necklace of yours?" It was stupid small talk, the kind of thing you say to a customer to be friendly. He just stared at me with these watery blue eyes and asked, "Would you like one?" I laughed it off. Sure, doesn't everyone need a human skull for their coffee table? 3 weeks later, he came back with a paper bag. "For your collection," he said, placing it on the counter before shuffling out. I thought it might be an old record or something. When I looked inside, there was a yellowish, dirt-stained skull. I nearly dropped it. It looked real, but I figured it had to be one of those medical replicas or a really good Halloween prop. I should have thrown it away right there. Instead, I brought it home. Maria freaked out when she saw it. She's always been superstitious. Crosses above doorways, salt lines when she gets nervous, that sort of thing. Her family is originally from Puerto Rico, and she grew up with all these stories about spirits and hauntings. "Get that thing out of our house, Jack," she said, backing away from it. "That's bad energy. Bad, bad energy." "It's just a fake," I said. "Probably plastic or something." I knocked on it. It didn't sound like plastic, though. It sounded solid, dense. To keep the peace, I took it down to the basement and put it on a shelf behind some boxes. I didn't want to throw away something so detailed, and honestly, I thought it looked cool. Stupid decision. Things changed about a week later. Maria's sister Camilla was visiting and watching Michael while Maria ran errands. When Maria got home, Camilla was pale, sitting on the couch, clutching Michael. "There was a little girl in his room," she said. "I went to check on him during his nap, and there was a little girl holding him, standing by his crib." Maria checked the house, thinking maybe a neighborhood kid had wandered in somehow, but there was nobody. Camilla swore the little girl had been wearing an old-fashioned dress, like something from the 20s with long dark hair. When she'd gasped, the girl had turned to look at her, then simply wasn't there anymore. We brushed it off as Camilla seeing things. Maybe she'd dozed off herself and dreamed it. But then Maria started having nightmares. She'd wake up screaming about men in our closet, not just one night, but 3 or 4 times a week. She described them as tall, thin men with sunken eyes, standing silently, watching her sleep. Sometimes she said they whispered things she couldn't understand. I never saw anything, but I started waking up with this feeling of dread, like something was very wrong in our house. Then Lily began sleepwalking. We'd find her in different parts of the house in the middle of the night. Once, around 3 in the morning, I found her sitting cross-legged in front of the TV in the living room. The TV wasn't on. "What are you doing, sweetheart?" I asked, kneeling beside her. She looked at me, but it was like she was looking through me. "Watching my show," she said flatly. "The TV isn't on, Lily." "They turn it on for me," she said. "They show me things." I picked her up and carried her back to bed. As I was tucking her in, she grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "I want to go play with my friends outside," she said. It was the middle of the night in November. I asked her what friends she was talking about. "The ones who live in the yard," she said. "They're waiting for me to come out." After that night, things escalated quickly. We'd hear footsteps on the stairs when everyone was accounted for. Not subtle creaks, heavy, deliberate steps that would stop at the top of the stairs, then start again, going back down. Sometimes we'd hear them in the middle of the night, going up and down for hours. Maria started seeing shadows moving across walls. She'd be washing dishes or folding laundry, and something dark would pass by in her peripheral vision. When she turned to look, nothing would be there, but she'd feel this cold spot like walking through an invisible freezer. I was skeptical at first. I kept finding logical explanations. Old houses make noise, shadows are just tricks of the light, kids have night terrors. But then I started experiencing things myself. One night I was up late in the basement, organizing my vinyl collection. I had music playing, but suddenly it stopped. Not like the power went out. The stereo was still on, but the sound just died. Then I felt something brush against the back of my neck, not like a spider or a draft. It felt like fingers, cold, dry fingers. I spun around, but there was nothing there. Then I noticed the skull. It had been behind some boxes on a shelf, but now it was sitting right in the open on top of a stack of records. I know I hadn't moved it. I know. I ran upstairs and found Maria in the bathroom, crying. She said she'd been taking a shower and felt someone watching her through the curtain. When she pulled it back, no one was there. But when she looked in the mirror, she saw a face behind her reflection, just for a second, an old woman's face with no eyes. We started sleeping with the lights on. I'd wake up at 3:15 every morning. Not 3, not 3:30. 3:15 on the dot, night after night. I'd feel this pressure on my chest, like someone was sitting on me. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I'd just lie there paralyzed, feeling this hatred directed at me. Pure, cold hatred. Lily stopped sleeping in her room. She said the children wouldn't leave her alone. They wanted her to come play and join them outside. She started drawing pictures at school that worried her teachers. Dark figures standing around beds, houses with faces in the windows. When her teacher asked who they were, Lily said, "The people who live in our walls." Maria's boyfriend, Paul, we weren't together anymore by this point, though we still lived in the same house for the kids, stayed over sometimes. He was a total skeptic, always rolling his eyes at our ghost stories. Then one night, he was alone downstairs while Maria put the kids to bed. When she came back down, he was sitting rigid on the couch, pale and sweating. "I don't know what the fuck just happened," he said, "but something just walked past me. I felt it brush against my legs, and then the couch cushion next to me depressed, like someone sat down, but there's nothing there." After that, he wouldn't stay over anymore, just said there was sketchy shit happening, and he didn't want any part of it. The worst incident happened about 6 months after we moved in. I came home from work to find Maria standing in the yard, holding both kids, refusing to go back inside. She was shaking so hard she could barely speak. When she calmed down, she told me she'd been in the kitchen when all the cabinet doors flew open at once. Not just opened, slammed open, hard enough that one of the hinges broke. Then something started throwing dishes, not falling, not sliding off shelves, actually picking them up and hurling them across the room. She grabbed the kids and ran outside. When I went in to look, there was broken glass and ceramic everywhere, cabinets standing open, no explanation, no earthquake, no gas leak, nothing. We stayed with her sister that night. I wanted to just leave for good, but we couldn't afford to break our lease and find a new place. So we went back, and for a while things seemed to calm down. Then one night, Lily disappeared from her bed. We searched the whole house in a panic before finding her in the basement, standing in front of that damn skull, having a conversation with it. When we asked what she was doing, she said, "He's telling me about the others." "What others, Lily?" I asked. "The ones he killed. He says there's more. He says they're coming." That was it. We moved out the next week, broke the lease, slept in our car until we found a cheap apartment. We hired movers to get our stuff because Maria refused to go back in. Here's the strangest part. When they cleaned out the basement, the skull was gone. We emptied that basement completely. Every box, every shelf. It wasn't there. The movers never saw it. We never packed it. It just vanished. Years later, when the house had new owners, Lily had to drop something off for the new family. She was 16 by then. She said the moment she stepped inside, She felt this overwhelming presence, like the house itself was telling her to get out. She felt paralyzed with fear, this sense that something was coming down the hallway toward her, something that had been waiting for her to come back. She dropped the package and ran. To this day, she won't drive down that street. Michael has recurring nightmares about a little girl who wants to take him outside. Maria still wakes up sometimes, swearing there's someone standing in our closet. And me? I still think about that old man with his bone necklaces. I've looked for him over the years, but nobody remembers him. The record store closed down long ago. Sometimes I wonder if he knew what he was giving me, if he knew what would happen. I still don't know if that skull was real. I don't know whose it was or why it brought such darkness into our home. All I know is that sometimes, late at night, I still hear footsteps on stairs that aren't there, and sometimes, just as I'm falling asleep, I feel cold, dry fingers brush against the back of my neck. Story 20. The apartment itself wasn't anything special. Just 2 bedrooms, a living room with a small kitchen area, and a bathroom with those old European fixtures that always seemed like they were about to break. The building was ancient, probably built sometime in the late 1800s, with those creaky wooden floors and walls so thin you could hear the neighbors sneeze. But during daytime, it felt normal. Just an old place with that distinct smell of aged wood and the lingering scent of whatever the previous tenants had cooked. The first week was actually exciting. Everything was new. The language, the food, the city. I started at the local elementary school, and though my French was terrible, kids are surprisingly good at communicating without words. I remember feeling happy about the move, thinking maybe this was our fresh start. Then it happened. The first night I saw her, I'd gone to bed around 9, exhausted from trying to understand my teacher all day. Mom kissed me goodnight and went to the living room to watch some TV before going to bed herself. I fell asleep almost instantly, but something woke me up in the middle of the night. I didn't know what time it was, probably around 2 or 3 in the morning. The room was dark except for the faint glow from the streetlights filtering through the thin curtains, and there she was, sitting on the edge of my bed, on my right side. At first, I thought it was Mom checking on me. The silhouette matched her perfectly. The same height, same hair length, same general shape. But as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I realized something was wrong. This figure was completely black, not like someone wearing dark clothes. It was as if someone had cut out a mom-shaped hole in reality. No facial features, no details at all. Just a pure black silhouette with perfectly defined edges. I remember my breath catching in my throat. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't work. I could move. I wasn't paralyzed like in those sleep paralysis stories I've read about since, but I was too terrified to do anything but stare. The figure was looking at me. I couldn't see eyes, but I could feel its attention focused entirely on me. Then, slowly, it reached out toward my leg on top of the blanket. The movement was so gentle, so maternal. Like Mom would do when comforting me. Its hand made the motion of stroking my leg, up and down, but I felt nothing. No pressure, no touch, not even a change in temperature where its hand should have been. I lay there, frozen in fear, watching this shadow caress me without touching me for what felt like hours. Eventually, my exhausted body betrayed me, and I fell back asleep despite my terror. When I woke up the next morning, she was gone. The sun was streaming through the window, and I could hear Mom in the kitchen making breakfast. For a moment, I wondered if it had been a nightmare, but deep down I knew it wasn't. I didn't tell Mom. What was I supposed to say? Hey, a shadow that looks exactly like you was sitting on my bed last night. She was already stressed about her new job and making sure I was adjusting well. I didn't want to add to her worries. But it happened again the next night, and the next, always the same. I'd wake up in the dark, and she'd be there, sitting on the edge of my bed, always on my right side, always with that caressing motion that never actually made contact. Sometimes she'd be there when I first woke up. Other times, I'd open my eyes to see her just sitting down, the mattress never dipping under her weight. After about 2 weeks of this, I started sleeping with my light on. It didn't help. She still appeared somehow both more and less visible in the light. In darkness, she was a defined silhouette. In light, she seemed to absorb it, becoming a void in the shape of my mother. I started developing insomnia. I'd fight sleep as long as I could, knowing she'd be waiting for me when I drifted off. My teacher noticed my exhaustion and called Mom, who started to worry I wasn't adapting well to France. I still couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. One night, about 2 months into our stay, I woke up to find her closer than ever before. Usually she sat at the edge of the bed, but this time she was leaning over me, that featureless void where her face should be just inches from mine. I could feel her, not physically but somehow energetically, examining me. I squeezed my eyes shut and counted to 100, something I'd started doing to calm myself. When I opened them again, she was back at the edge of the bed, making that same caressing motion. That was the night I finally broke. When morning came, I burst into tears at breakfast and told Mom everything. She listened carefully, concern written all over her face. She didn't dismiss me or tell me I was imagining things. Instead, she called in sick to work and spent the day making calls to a doctor, to my teacher, and finally to my grandparents back home. The doctor found nothing physically wrong with me, but suggested it might be stress from the move manifesting as night terrors. My teacher mentioned that the building we lived in was quite old and had a history, though she wouldn't elaborate when Mom pressed her for details. That night, Mom slept in my bed with me. For the first time in weeks, I didn't see the shadow figure. I slept peacefully with Mom's real warm arm around me. I thought maybe that was the end of it, that whatever this thing was, it couldn't appear when Mom was actually there. I was wrong. The next night, Mom needed to sleep in her own bed. She had an important presentation at work the following day and needed proper rest. She left my bedroom door open and the hallway light on, promising she'd hear me if I called out. I fell asleep eventually, only to wake up around 2 in the morning, and there they both were, my real mother, sleeping soundly in the other room visible through my open door, and her shadow duplicate, sitting on the edge of my bed, making that same caressing motion. I screamed then, a real scream that tore from my throat and echoed through the apartment. The shadow vanished instantly, not fading away, but disappearing between one blink and the next. Mom came running in, flipping on my light, her eyes wild with worry. We moved back home the following month. Mom quit her job, apologized to my grandparents about the apartment, and used our savings to get us back. She never said she believed me entirely, but she believed something was affecting me severely, and that was enough. The shadow didn't follow us home. For 3 years, I slept normally. The experience in France gradually took on the quality of a bad dream, something I could almost convince myself hadn't really happened. I was 11, in 6th grade, and living in a house we shared with my aunt, uncle, and cousin to save on rent. Life was normal. I was happy. Then one night, I woke up around 3 in the morning. My bedroom door was open. I always kept it cracked to let in light from the living room where someone usually left the TV on low. In the doorway, illuminated by the flickering blue glow of the television, stood my mother. At least, it had my mother's body, her height, her slightly rounded shoulders from years of office work, her hair, that distinctive reddish-brown I'd inherited, even her clothes, the faded blue robe she always wore at night. But where her face should have been was nothing but darkness, not shadow, not absence, but a concentrated void that seemed to swallow the TV light that should have illuminated her features. I felt a cold sweat break out across my body. "Mom?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The figure didn't move, didn't respond, just stood there faceless, watching me. I remembered then that Mom wasn't supposed to be home. She'd taken a night shift at her second job, something she did twice a week to help with bills. She shouldn't be home until morning. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Whatever had haunted me in France had found me again, and it had gotten better at mimicking my mother. I pulled my blanket up to my chin, a childish defense. The figure took a step into my room, then another. Its movements were smooth, fluid, just like Mom's. It came to the foot of my bed and stood there, that faceless void turned toward me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. All I could think was, it's never come this close before. Then from down the hall, I heard the bathroom door open. My cousin's voice called out sleepily, "Who's up?" The figure turned its head, that horrible empty head, toward the sound. Then it simply wasn't there anymore. No movement, no fading away. One moment present, the next gone. My cousin appeared in my doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Were you talking to someone?" I couldn't answer him, just shook my head, still staring at the spot where it had stood. The next morning, I confirmed that Mom had indeed been at work all night. Whatever I'd seen wasn't her. When she came home, I told her everything, the words tumbling out in a panicked rush. She held me as I cried, promised we'd figure it out. We moved again a month later. Mom said it was for a better job opportunity, but I knew the real reason. She believed me this time. It's been 15 years since then. I've been to therapists, sleep specialists, even a couple of paranormal researchers in my more desperate moments. I've tried medications, meditation, sleeping with lights both on and off. Nothing makes sense. I've had brain scans, been tested for seizures, temporal lobe epilepsy, every medical explanation possible. The shadow still comes sometimes. Not every night, not even every month, but enough to keep me from ever feeling truly safe in the dark, always with my mother's form but never her face, always watching, always reaching out but never touching. I still don't know what it is or what it wants, why it took my mother's shape, why it followed me across countries and years. All I know is that somewhere in the darkness of my bedroom, it waits, and sometimes, when I least expect it, I'll wake to find it there. A perfect silhouette of my mother with a void where her face should be, reaching out with hands I can never feel. Story 21. I've never shared this with anyone outside my immediate family, and even they think I was just a kid with an overactive imagination. But I swear what I saw was real, and 21 years later, I still get chills thinking about it. This happened back in 2002 when I was 11 years old. I lived in one of those cookie-cutter suburban neighborhoods in Ohio where all the houses looked pretty much the same. Nothing exciting ever happened there, which is why what I experienced stands out so vividly in my memory. It was early October, a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because we had gym class that day and I was wearing my Cleveland Indians t-shirt that I always saved for gym days. The weather was starting to get cooler, but it was still sunny enough that I didn't need my jacket on the bus ride home. I always sat in the same spot on the bus, about halfway back on the right side. I liked that spot because I could lean my head against the window and watch the world go by. Our bus route took us down Maple Avenue, which was the main boulevard that connected the school to our neighborhood. It was usually busy with afternoon traffic, people heading home from work, running errands, that kind of thing. That day, I was tired. We'd played dodgeball in gym, and I'd managed to stay in until nearly the end, which meant a lot of running and dodging. So I was just zoning out, watching the cars pass by as our bus crawled through traffic. You know how it is when you're a kid. You make little games out of ordinary things. I was playing one where I'd try to spot as many red cars as possible before we reached my stop. The traffic was moving slowly that day. I remember our bus driver, Mrs. Peterson, sighing loudly and muttering something about construction. We were barely moving, which gave me plenty of time to observe the cars around us. Most drivers were doing typical driver things, gripping the steering wheel, checking mirrors, talking on those chunky flip phones everyone had back then. Nothing unusual until I saw it. It was this small SUV, either a Honda CR-V or maybe a Toyota RAV4, dark green. It pulled up alongside our bus, moving slightly faster than we were. At first, I didn't notice anything strange about it, but as it started to pass us, I realized something was terribly wrong. There was no one in the driver's seat. I remember sitting up straight and blinking hard, thinking maybe I just couldn't see the driver from my angle, but I could. I could see the entire front seat clearly. The steering wheel was moving slightly as the car navigated through traffic, but there was nobody there to turn it. I pressed my face closer to the window, and that's when I noticed something even more disturbing. In the back seat, there was a woman, but she wasn't sitting normally. She was facing completely sideways, her entire body turned toward my window, toward me. It was like she was sitting perpendicular to the way the seats were designed, which shouldn't have been physically possible in such a confined space. Her legs were tucked up in a way that looked uncomfortable, almost like she was folded into the space. But her face, God, her face is what still haunts me. It was completely blurred out, not like it was moving too fast for me to see, but like someone had taken an eraser and just smudged all her features away. Where there should have been eyes, a nose, a mouth, there was just this flesh-colored blur. Her hair was long and black and messy, hanging down in stringy clumps, and she was so thin, not just skinny, but unnaturally so, like someone who'd been sick for a long time. The worst part was that she seemed to be staring directly at me. I couldn't see her eyes, but I felt her gaze. It was like she knew I was watching her, and she was watching me back. The car kept pace with our bus for what felt like forever, but was probably only about 30 seconds. I was frozen, unable to look away. None of the other kids seemed to notice anything weird. They were all talking and laughing and throwing paper airplanes, but I sat there completely still, locked in this bizarre staring contest with something I couldn't explain. My first thought was that maybe the driver had dropped something and was bending down to pick it up. That happens, right? But no. From my elevated position on the school bus, I would have been able to see anyone bent over in the front seat. The seat was completely empty. The car was driving itself, which wasn't a thing back in 2002. I tried to rationalize it. At the time, I was taking some medication for my ADHD. Maybe it was affecting my vision, maybe I was seeing things. But I'd been on that medication for months without any side effects like hallucinations. As the SUV started to pull ahead of us, I remember pressing my hands against the glass, desperately trying to keep it in view. I wanted to yell, to point it out to someone else, but my voice was stuck in my throat. And honestly, I was scared that if I did say something, no one would believe me, or worse, the woman might somehow hear me. Just before the SUV pulled completely out of view, the woman's head tilted to the side at an angle that didn't seem humanly possible. It was like her neck had an extra joint, and even though I couldn't see her mouth, I got the distinct impression she was smiling at me. Then the car accelerated and merged into the lane ahead of us, eventually disappearing into traffic. I sat back in my seat, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I kept watching for the dark green SUV for the rest of the ride home, but I never saw it again. When I got off at my stop, my legs were shaking so badly I almost fell. I ran all the way home, not even stopping to talk to my friend Jake, who lived a few houses down and usually walked with me from the bus stop. As soon as I got home, I told my mom what I'd seen. She listened patiently, but I could tell she didn't believe me. She suggested that maybe I'd fallen asleep on the bus and had a vivid dream. I insisted I hadn't been sleeping, but she just ruffled my hair and said I had quite an imagination. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that featureless face staring at me. I kept my bedroom light on until morning, something I hadn't done since I was 7. The next day at school, I tried to tell my best friend Ethan about it during lunch. He laughed and asked if I'd been reading those scary stories to tell in the dark books again. I stopped trying to convince him halfway through my explanation. For the next few weeks, I was terrified of riding the bus. I begged my mom to drive me to school, making up excuses about bullies or homework I needed to finish on the way. Sometimes it worked, but mostly I had to get back on that bus and ride down Maple Avenue, my eyes scanning every passing car for that dark green SUV. I never saw it again. As time passed, I started to question my own memory. Maybe my mom was right. Maybe I had dozed off and dreamed the whole thing. Maybe it was just a trick of the light combined with an 11-year-old's active imagination. But here's the thing, I know what I saw. 21 years later, I can still describe every detail of that car and that woman. The memory hasn't faded or changed over time like dreams tend to do. It's remained crystal clear, like it's been preserved in amber. I've never experienced anything else paranormal or unexplainable in my life. I'm not the type of person who sees ghosts in every shadow or believes in conspiracy theories. I'm an accountant now, for God's sake. My whole life revolves around concrete numbers and verifiable facts. But on that ordinary Tuesday in 2002, I saw something I still can't explain. A car driving itself, years before self-driving technology existed. And a woman who defied the laws of physics and human anatomy, whose face was nothing but a blur, staring at me with an intensity that seemed to transcend the physical distance between us. Sometimes when I'm driving home from work in heavy traffic, I find myself scanning the cars around me. I never knew why the woman was staring at me, or what would have happened if the car hadn't pulled away when it did. Was she trying to communicate something? Was she a ghost, or something else entirely? Was she even real? I've looked up local accidents from around that time, wondering if maybe I'd seen some kind of echo or replay of a tragedy, but nothing matched what I saw. The only theory that makes any sense to me now is that maybe, just maybe, I glimpsed something that wasn't meant to be seen. A glitch in reality, a moment where the curtain between our world and something else briefly parted. I don't expect anyone to believe me. Most days, I'm not even sure I believe myself. But I know what I saw that day, and sometimes, when I'm about to fall asleep, I still see that blurred face turning toward me, that impossible angle of her neck, and I wonder if somewhere out there, she's still watching me. Story 22. I've always felt safe at my grandmother's house. Ever since I was a little kid, visits to Grandma Martha's place in Pinecrest were something I looked forward to. Home-cooked meals, the huge backyard where I'd play for hours, and that special feeling of being somewhere that just feels right, you know. Even after my grandfather Robert passed away from a heart attack in 2019, the house still felt like a sanctuary. It was sad without him, sure, but never scary or unsettling. That changed about 3 months ago. I'm 17 now, a senior in high school, and I still visit Grandma Martha regularly, usually staying over on weekends to help with yard work and keep her company. She's 72, but still pretty independent. The first night I noticed something was off was in early September. I was in the guest bedroom, the same one I've slept in since I was like 8 years old, when I woke up around 3 in the morning with this overwhelming sense of dread. It wasn't like waking up from a nightmare where the feeling fades after a few seconds. This was different. I felt like I needed to be alert, like something was watching me. The room was dark except for the faint glow from the streetlight outside filtering through the blinds, and I swear the shadows in the corners seemed deeper than they should have been. I grabbed my phone to check the time and used the screen light to see better, but the feeling didn't go away. I'm not usually a scaredy cat. I've watched plenty of horror movies without losing sleep, but something about this fear felt primal. Before I even realized what I was doing, I reached for the Bible my grandma keeps in the nightstand drawer. I've been raised Christian, go to church most Sundays, but I've never felt compelled to grab a Bible in the middle of the night before. I started reading Psalms, and eventually fell back asleep with the book open on my chest. I brushed it off as a weird night, maybe something I ate, but then it happened again the following weekend, same room, same time, around 3 a.m. This time, though, it was worse. I was dreaming, and in the dream I saw a face hovering above me. Not a normal face. It had white paint all over it with black circles around the eyes. It wasn't saying anything, just staring. I tried to scream but couldn't. As I was struggling in the dream, I felt my pillow being yanked from underneath my head. Not in the dream, but in real life. I jerked awake to find my pillow halfway off the bed, as if someone had been pulling it while I slept. The room was empty. The door was still closed. I checked under the bed, in the closet. Nothing. But the feeling of being watched was stronger than ever. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, just sat up with all the lights on, scrolling through my phone until dawn. I didn't tell my grandma. What would I even say? "Hey, Grandma, I think something's messing with me while I sleep in your house." She'd either worry herself sick or think I was making it up, so I kept quiet. The next month, things started happening during the day too. I was helping Grandma dust the living room when one of her big fake plants, this heavy thing in a ceramic pot that sits in the corner, just toppled over. Neither of us was anywhere near it. Grandma blamed it on the pot being uneven, but I saw her face. She was unsettled too, even if she wouldn't admit it. Then came the scratches. I woke up one Sunday morning with these thin red marks on my throat and across my back. They weren't deep, but they stung like paper cuts. Grandma saw them at breakfast and asked if I'd been scratching myself in my sleep. I said yes, because what else could I say? That something invisible attacked me. But I know I didn't do it to myself. The scratches on my back were in places I couldn't even reach. The shadows started appearing about a month ago. Quick movements in my peripheral vision, always near my grandfather's old office. That room has been mostly unused since he died. Grandma goes in occasionally to dust, but otherwise it stays closed. Sometimes I'd glance down the hallway and see what looked like someone ducking into that room, but when I'd check, it would be empty and undisturbed. I started bringing a small wooden cross with me when I visited, something my mum gave me for my confirmation a few years back. I'm not superstitious, but I figured it couldn't hurt. I'd place it on the pillow next to mine when I went to sleep, a stupid little security measure that somehow made me feel better, until I woke up one morning to find it across the room, on top of the dresser. I know nobody came into that room overnight. I've started placing a piece of paper in the door jamb when I close it, an old trick I learned from some spy movie. If anyone opens the door, the paper falls. It was still in place when I woke up, but somehow the cross had moved about 15 feet from where I'd left it. The knocking started last weekend. 3 distinct knocks coming from inside my grandmother's closet around 2:30 in the morning. I actually went to check if she was awake and needed something, but she was sound asleep in her room. When I opened her closet cautiously, there was nothing there that could have made the noise, just hanging clothes and shoe boxes. Yesterday was the worst, though. That's why I'm writing this all down now. I need to get it out, try to make sense of it somehow. I'd driven to Grandma's after school to help bring in groceries. She still insists on doing the shopping herself, but I try to be there when she gets home so she doesn't have to carry the heavy bags. We were bringing everything in from her car when we both heard a crash from inside the house. We rushed in to find my high school senior portrait, the one she had framed and placed on the mantel, face down on the floor. The glass hadn't broken, thankfully, but there was no reason for it to fall. It wasn't near an edge, there hadn't been an earthquake, and the windows were closed, so no breeze could have knocked it over. Grandma picked it up, put it back, and made some comment about needing to level the mantel. But her hands were shaking. I think she knows something's not right, but she's not talking about it either. Last night was the final straw. I'd fallen asleep around 11, exhausted from a math test and football practice. The cross was in its usual place next to my pillow, and I'd wedged the paper in the door like always. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of breathing that wasn't mine. It was close, like someone was standing right beside the bed. I could feel the air getting colder, especially around my feet. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to reach for the light or call out. Then I felt something brush against my leg through the blanket, not like a pet or something small, but like fingers dragging slowly from my ankle to my knee. I managed to kick out and scramble for the light switch. When the room lit up, there was nothing visible, but the cross was now at the foot of the bed, and there were 3 distinct indentations on the blanket next to my leg, like someone had been pressing down with their fingers. I spent the rest of the night with all the lights on, sitting in the corner of the room with my back against the wall so I could see everything. I prayed harder than I ever have in my life, not just the standard prayers I learned in Sunday school, but desperate, pleading prayers for whatever this was to leave me alone. This morning at breakfast, Grandma asked if I was feeling all right. I must have looked as bad as I felt. I almost told her everything then, the fear, the scratches, the moving objects, all of it. But then she mentioned how peaceful the house has felt lately, how she sometimes feels like Grandpa is still around in a comforting way, watching over her. How could I tell her that whatever is in this house isn't Grandpa? That it doesn't feel peaceful or comforting? That it feels malicious? I don't believe in ghosts. Never have. but I do believe in demons. My family's faith has always acknowledged their existence. What I don't understand is why something like that would be here, in this house of all places. Grandma and Grandpa were devoted Christians their whole lives. There are Bibles in nearly every room. Grandma still does her devotions every morning at the kitchen table. We pray before meals. The house is full of crosses and religious artwork. If evil is supposed to flee from faith, why is it drawn to this place? Why now, years after Grandpa's death? And why does it seem focused on me? I'm back home now, in my parents' house, but I'm going to Grandma's again this weekend. I can't abandon her, and I can't tell her what's happening without proof. She's been through enough since losing Grandpa, but I'm terrified of spending another night in that guest room. I've started researching, looking up similar experiences online, reading about spiritual warfare, anything that might help me understand what's happening. Some people suggest leaving, but others say that entities can follow you if they've formed an attachment. I don't know what to believe. All I know is that the house that was once my safe haven now fills me with dread. Every creak, every shadow makes my heart race. I've started sleeping with my bedroom door open at home and asking my mom to check on me during the night, making up excuses about having bad dreams so she doesn't worry too much. I need advice from anyone who's experienced something similar. I'm not looking for someone to tell me I'm imagining things. I know what I've felt and seen. The scratches were real. The moving objects were real. That breathing beside my bed was real. What do I do? How do I protect myself and my grandmother from whatever has invaded her home? And how do I face going back there tomorrow night, knowing what might be waiting for me in that guest room?